Hi everyone. For this video, I wanted to celebrate my birthday by announcing that my book series is finished. And the whole point of this video is to read what I wrote in regards to that celebration. Effectively, before June 1st, I decided to sit down and write a commemoration. And this commemoration was meant to acknowledge that my book series was finished, but also presented an opportunity to, for one last time, insofar as the series goes, involve various models to pose for me and for me to credit them as members of the project. So, this acknowledgement was something that I wrote before June 1st, and it is now up and online as of my birthday today. The point of this video will be to read the entirety of the commemoration as well as the acknowledgements at the bottom of the post. Also, this is the safer work version of the commemoration, meaning that most of the images involving the models and the artwork and just any visual aid that you can find has either been replaced, censored, or cropped. So if you want to read the not safe for work version, we will not be doing that here, but there will be links in the post of this safe for work version that, when clicked on, will take you to the website version, which has all of the original images intact. Without further ado, I'm going to start reading the commemoration. My book series is finished June 1st, 2025. Today is June 1st, and I wish to celebrate the culmination of my 6-book series, Sex Positivity 2022 Present, the longer title being Sex Positivity versus Sex Coercion or Gothic Communism, Liberating Sex Work Under Capitalism Through Iconoclastic Art. The last book released on May 9th, followed by the final book editions on May 10th. Today, the day of my birth, June 1st, I briefly recognize the life and times of the whole shebang. Will rehash plug my shit as food for thought, but also that of those who worked alongside me, offering up their unbutt-plugged, a cake is a lie, forbidden fruit, peaches or otherwise. As a medievalist and familial go-to, having done her fair share of weddings and funerals, I'll mix ceremony with gravity and levity, displaying the usual Gothic Conan to Castlevania-style promotions of confrontation amid comfort food promises of adventure, lust, and danger as performance, sex, drugs, and rock and roll, delivered cryptomimetically in the face of encroaching unknown, Ari per Hogel, the ghost of the counterfeit's usual fairy tales, ancient romances, ghost stories, operas, urban legends, noirs, murder ballads, and gutter ballets, etc. Let's dance on this grave, babes. It's time for the final showdown, the grand finale, mid-Unheimlich. That's no moon, it's a space station. Galatia's caked up, so hit it from the back, little man. Echoes of a womb state, / state shift, fuck to metal, and everyone loves the whore. The Gothic replete with hauntologies home to horrors of all sorts below. Please note, most of the images have either been cropped or removed from this version of the grand finale. A couple are also placeholders. The Not Safe for Work version with all the images is on my 18 and Up website. Also, I've decided to add the entire project acknowledgements to the bottom of this post. It began with a whisper, now scream, a grand finale to my book series. Quote, as you can imagine, profit structure and grim prostitution historically materially translate easily enough to revenge by one side committed dualistically against the other in praxial opposition of man, the nuclear model, and Tolkien man-box forms portraying nature and labor versus nature as whore, and vice versa. i.e. commonly expressing as Amazonamachia during ancient to ancient wrestling kayfabe dialogues, psychomachia, and similar derelict theatricalities, but also the Medusa and many other monstrous feminine GNC forms that routinely play such things out as vice characters generally do. Through monstrous theater and its myriad death masks, costumes, and mirrors, from animals and undead to demons, but also birthday suits. Whatever the monstrosity exhibiting itself, antiquity and weaponized nudism go together like peanut butter and chocolate. The mommy-dom is delicious and crushing, like a black hole, sucking us inside. Except notions of psychosexuality aside, it's not strictly nihilism if the end result of such playtime is an end of profit, thus rape. A profane wicked joy waits for us at the ass end of space, a dark star to take us to its hellish center and crush us to oblivion. Unquote. Persephone VanderWaard, A Raper Prize, 2024. Note, this conclusion was originally dedicated to closing the series while commemorating various models, whose dedication is now closer to the center of the finale than the start. Having a bit of extra time, I've expanded on this grand finale, i.e. in my usual gonzo conversational style, pointedly emphasizing a variety of ideas important to Gothic gay anarcho-communism, as an incredibly diverse, inclusive, and holistic movement that reflects the praxial complexities of development mid-iconoclasm, not just as an uncanny merger of anarcho-communism with Marxist theories, intersectional gender studies, ludology, deconstructionism, post-colonialism, etc., to raise emotional Gothic intelligence and class culture and race awareness, what Marx called consciousness, but a collective pedagogy of the oppressed, composed primarily of whores and or racial minorities, disabled people, neurodivergent persons working outside academia, as billboards above, and all while stealing fire from the gods, to liberate all parties with, through adequate versus exclusionary argument, framing various outgroups as conspiracy. Capital divides, keeping workers at each other's throats, a form of prescribed power abuse. Communism unites, its iconoclastic aesthetic of power and death preventing harm, i.e. by camping Cannon's sexualizing of all workers per the nuclear model, profit motive, virgin horse syndrome, etc. Thesis-wise, whores are classically unpaid homewreckers that upend home, specifically the nuclear model and all its genocidal effects. Under capital, home equals prison, a secret brothel housing unpaid labor as perpetual alien inside, and one whose perennial alienation must be steadily renewed by the middle class, furthering abjection for the elite during capitalist realism, i.e. from Radcliffe's Black Veil, to Lovecraft's cosmic nihilism, to Cameron's military optimism, reviving dated but die-hard ethnocentric tropes post-Vietnam. There's always a goalpost to move, one that incessantly frames the horror as enemy within, from city-states onwards. If silence is genocide for us, then our voices, our horrors, tawdry voyeurism, and wanton exhibits, actively compose the state's demise by testifying against the elite calling us criminal, dirty, and up to no good. My finale is conversational despite its thesis, and moreover stays relatively short despite its additions, roughly 50 pages plus illustrations. In it, we focus on the Medusa, the Numinous, and the whore's revenge against profit and the pimp's revenge. But there's dozens of other ideas endemic to the series at large, which I'll barely have time to mention here, i.e. some being more broad and some more niche, e.g. the entire series is dedicated to combating Mark Fisher's idea of capitalist realism, generally by reclaiming monstrous language, reversing the abjection process, us versus them, during rape play to combat tokenization, re during Ludogothic BDSM, which apart from having an entire research compendium dedicated to it, similar to Amazon's Metroidvania and Tolkien, also explores alienation and reclaiming it through different monster modules, e.g. vampires, zombies, demonic abduction, and werewolves, etc. If you see something you want to explore more, be that modular or intersectional, e.g. witches and why they classically like to eat babies, which overlaps with vampire mythology, sodomy, and problematic love at large, my book series has already explored it at length, i.e. across 4 volumes, 6 modules, over 2 million words, 90 models, and dozens of muses. Being the grand finale for a larger online non-profit book series, I'm going to assume you've at least skimmed things previously. If not, then hi, nice to meet you. Use my individual book promotions to search through Sex Positivity's 4 book volumes and 2 monster modules. Beyond that, refer to these links for even more information. Paratextual Gothic documents regarding our 4 main Gothic theories, abjection, ontology, chronotopes, and cryptonomy, but also Judy Castricano's cryptomimesis and Gerald Hogel's narrative of the crypt, as well as the state trifectas, monopolies, and qualities of capital, the last of which I commonly refer to as the state's tools. Audience, art, and reading order, Gothic communism logo design, acknowledgements about the author, and the series glossary and disclaimer. Fret not, there's always another castle. I'll still be questing for the numinous in the future, but my series here has seemingly ended its life, closing out only to live on, like the phoenix or the gorgon, through my friends, but also the brave warriors who police them, i.e. as merely the seemingly good opposites to what are in essence Venus warrior twins, us aliens, fucking back on the Aegis. Taking this duality into account, and to its logical conclusion, reincarnation and warrior culture aren't monopolized by the state, but whose application towards universal liberation exists in dialectical material opposition through intersectional solidarity as the antidote to capital's historical material death loop, aka profit, and the profit motives Protestant ethic going hand in hand with moral panics, which center the whore as perpetual victim. The fight is one that occurs more generally through testimony, what Eleanor Neale describes as the sharing of stories being women's greatest weapon. What she likens to gossips of a more earthly sort. I speak to anger and gossip through the language of monsters, but specifically Barbara Creed's monstrous feminine, i.e. the ilk of succubae, sirens, witches, amazons, oracles, and yes, whores, is caught between two worlds, like Persephone or Hippolyta, among countless others. Whores are classically captured, and screeched from beyond out of hell as a space of dreams, where exploitation and liberation both occupy, and whose liminality the succubus and their wicked testimony calls home to offend home as devised by capital and the state. A drop of this and a bit of tea is what it takes to set them free. That's the gist of things. Keeping it and my finale thesis in mind, I've organized the grand finale into different sections for your convenience. Dark Whispers, Whores and Whence They Come, Their Revenge versus the State and its Pimps during Little Gothic BDSM, featuring Cara Day. The Whore's Refrain, Sex Work is Work, and All Whores Are Monsters, featuring Angel Witch and Kuwu. A Chorus of Profligates, or All Whores Are Monsters Struggling to Survive, recognizing my friend's help and value in this project, featuring Mugiwara, Kay of Sunshine, and many others. A Crescendo, Medusa, Iconoclast Warrior and Spy, featuring Mom, Delilah, and Itzel. Screaming from Hell, or Finding Your Power and On to Better Things, and a planetary brothel run by whores, featuring Itzel and Harmony Corrupted. Here We Go Again, or a Devilish Encore, Medusa's Siren Song, Putting the Pussy on the Chain Wax, featuring Harmony Corrupted. Dark Whispers, Whores and Whence They Come, Their Revenge versus the State and its Pimps, during Ludo Gothic BDSM. Whores camp canon to survive. Camp concerns castration, be that figurative or literal, rape, fears, and play, and such ubiquitous, ominous, and endemic sentiments are neither new to capital, nor did they emerge ex nihilo. The iconoclast destroying Rome, and all its yesterdays into the future. Beheading goes both ways, a desire to whisper our revenge, for once. In Gothic, black equals whore, bastard, criminal, goth, destroyer, or great destroyer, and so on, meaning in duality while trapped inside the nuclear model. The state doesn't fight fair, so why should we? You think 1 against 4 is a dogfall? Let this be our dumb supper, feeding our killers their own brains. Echoes of Timora, Shakespeare's Queen of the Goths. We hand the ignominious death back to them. Medusa, beheading, Perseus. Speculations of sentiment and their murky origins aside, we whores, which generally consist of GNC folk and other minorities, camp canon because we must. That's what Little Gothic BDSM essentially is, playing with rape by putting it in quotes, testifying to what is normally unspeakable, artist to muse, to have the horror's revenge. Often this happens by playing with taboo topics, as the Gothic does, and what horrors represent to catch one's eye with, controlling the scene. e.g. rape, incest, parental abuse, infanticide, and similar forms of classically female and intersex violence, e.g. tocophobia, rape, pregnancies, abortions, female circumcision, stalking and toxic love, possessive marriage, forced to voluntary substance abuse, dissociation, etc., mutilation, murder, and so on, and often portrayed in the ancient paradoxical language of drugs, dreams, and theater, comedy and drama, but also camp. These include the Gothic statue or portrait as linked to a fearsome past or terrible crime testifying to survival as the imprecise ghost of a former victim, not just hugging, but fucking the alien to befriend it, mid-dialectic, on stage and off. In keeping with pimps versus whores, we're commonly left with a battle of the sexes, which Amazonomachia essentially is. It's a binary, and binaries under capital are canon, therefore colonial, i.e. delivered through domestic to foreign forms of unironic police violence that routinely yield rigid, singular interpretations, murder. It's prescriptive versus descriptive. Mankind is his own worst enemy, but also ours, turning our extermination into a spectator's racket with regular Tolkien betrayals, whores policing whores, Ari, TERFs. Under this violence and its surveillance, we whores must describe the scalding, caustic violence prescribed to us, one of the creative successes of proletarian praxis. This demands working the audience while also, just as often, being of the crowds we please, often under duress, i.e. capital sexualizes everything, and whores, among other things, are often loud and proud gay theater nerds working with fatal nostalgia, dated tropes, e.g. warrior athletes, fear in all its forms and subversions, banned books, gallows humor, vaudeville, stylish menace, the poetic abstraction of various hyper-objects, namely capitalism versus communism, sinister of vague criteria, e.g. a nocturne, and Gothic panache to camp, thus turns head past, and fascination with it, against state proponents, i.e. by turning their mechanisms and flow of power anisotropically inside out, i.e. the state is straight, and colonizes everything for profit in ways GNC folk classically reconcile with, through theater on stage and off, from Shakespeare's slutty fairies in A Midsummer Night's Dream, to Matthew Lewis, to Vincent Price, to Divine. There must always be a whore to punish under state models, the state of exception. The whore's revenge roots in camp as revenge from positions of automatic and paradoxically sacred relegation, the pecking order. To it, flow determines function through dialectical material context, freaks in the sheets, and the streets. We gay space whores channel the voices of the dead, demonized and verminized, helping demystify their exploitation while in the same hushed breath, speaking in code, make cryptonomy through praxial opposition, screaming as loud as possible. In keeping with nature as monstrous feminine, alien to police by state forces, often token forces, re. horse, such things speak dualistically to the damsel and hag, crone, fade, gorgon, etc., but also the virgin and the whore, angel and devil, damsel and demon, regardless of age. Medusa is, like any being accused of falsehood by state forces, both laced with actual trauma and marked for death regardless if said accusations hold true, re. the whore's paradox. As far as the West cares, this dichotomy is the oldest police criminal element there is. It is ancient and ontologized. The ambiguous black mark on a pearly white paradise long before race as a concept came about, though certainly one that abused it afterwards. The whore from Medusa onwards is a trick puller, so to speak, one to canonically blame for its own brutalizing by state forces playing the pimp in bad faith, i.e. the latter sacrificing the former to save the princess and her so-called purity, a creature both undead, demonic, and or animalistic, depending on your poetic bent, and one speaking to imperialism, the highest form of capitalism but also the oldest, and its routine hyphenating of sex and force, and similar confusions, e.g. predator-prey and friend-foe, nun-slut, Catholic-Protestant, etc., for all monstrous feminine, female or not, white or not, human or not. In turn, the state endlessly takes the whore, which is older than the state, the oldest profession, in fact, and kills it to exist. The whore's revenge, in turn, is the oldest there is, the oldest profession, exploitation, and desire for liberation from canonical images touting Medusa's regular castration, thus rape, a pariah, convict, closet case, and guerrilla show pony sentenced for repeated massacre, defilement, and harassment to elevate state symbols of authority and strength. Male or not, re. witch cops, e.g. Amazons. State actors prove their manhood by killing the horror inside nature as colonized, re. home as prison, i.e. enforcing silence to conduct genocide, with existence something to silence by closeting it through menticidal force. Nature is always lesser than the state, whatever form either takes, e.g. turfs. Furthermore, gentler tone policing obscures the usual cautionary tale brutalities routinely on display through man-box arguments, prison sex mentalities, to be seen not heard inside the brothel. The whore is not a valuable witness in canon, but a regular scapegoat, something to attack, blame, unhouse, unbelieve, kill, and presumably because she's a vengeful backstabber per the state's usual false flags. She's a terror and or drug to war against, the original other privatized by justice, thus prison, as corrupt by design through an addict's refrain. The pimp? Addicted to rape, punching the whore for the pearl clutchers previously enriched through genocide, i.e. inheritance anxiety manufacturing controversy by dressing up whatever sacrifices invariably result, spuriously calling them rescue. re. Andromeda freed with Medusa's Caesarean rape baby, the Pegasus, but also Persephone abducted and taken to hell as property the state must classically retrieve through equally rapacious force below. Extinction isn't an event, but a structure, Wolfe, though he's perfectly right about settler colonialism and the elimination of the native. And nobody love bombs like the state, who holds the virgin and the whore ransom, as indigenous, wild, and untamed to an ancient degree, constantly being rewritten. It's the liar's paradox, i.e. binaries are classically false, but they're what the state uses to rape the world through its usual essentialized deceptions, the romance of shattered innocence, but also a signature fragility of memory and broken childhoods, framing the home as tragically but fundamentally undermined by horrors to blame on repeat, normalizing their rape mid-forgetfulness. Luckily, the Gothic is fundamentally arcane, deconstructionist, passing itself off as mere trash to broach the taboo, i.e. doing so through found documents, concentric puzzles, and outrageous sex, and black magic, reanimative violence, re. Matthew Lewis. As such, it remains entirely unconcerned with time as linear, embracing anything circular and confounding to favor the oppressed, not the state treating us like fetishized us versus them thought crimes. Yet, the state apologizes for rape to a Protestant messianic degree, re. the Puritan ethic. We whores, by comparison, confront our own rape during calculated risk, as the animal scapegoat, playing out the usual abuses on the marriage altar and its dark double outside the bedroom as much as inside it, the nuclear home. The fact remains, whores are chattel that predate the West, e.g. ancient Egypt's godly furries showcasing the whore's animalized ontological components. But since the West's inception, as we commonly recognize it nowadays, e.g. Athens, Sparta, and Rome, have been canonized as the criminal yawping anti-maiden to punish, despite the virgin whore paradox, i.e. through the monomyth and ancient canonical codes, dictating the horror as something essentially villainous to police by heroes for as long as civilization has been demonstrably around. re. Freud and Freudian pastiche, which Creed essentially is, but also Ellen Moore's, Angela Carter, and a lot of other white straight European women from the 1970s, 80s, and 90s, stuck in the same shadow of Pygmalion, obfuscating Marx's historical materialism and dialectical material analysis in favor of psychoanalysis. Freud was, among many other things, a sexist homophobic pimp with mommy issues, and the Gothic heavily camps such nuclear dogmas, which my work on Gothic communism extends to Marx's own failings, i.e. by invoking funerary resurrection through camp, punctuating its own black humor with wanton murder and sardonic lust, mocking the canon's fairy tale view of the world by deliberately attacking sacred symbols for reasons that aren't always obvious, e.g. Charlotte Docra's Victoria de Lorendani from Zafloya destroying the symbol of the lily-white maiden, suitably titled Lila, because of what it represents, a smaller, weaker, segregated version of Victoria, the proxy warrior for Docra's own iconoclasm, making Victoria a dark reflection of Lila, the maidenesque simulacrum darling for Docra to kill, and parody of the Gothic heroine taken to its fatal logical conclusion. See Sam Hurst's Zafloya and the Female Gothic. Camp plays with murder and rape in neo-medieval forms, ergo I call camp making it gay, insofar as doing so injects an alien element into canon, reversing objection, often as it turns out, from otherworldly zones associated with past death, damnation, exile, and abuse, but also prostitution, something ancient and numinous for viewers to seek out for different reasons. These include the whore or the pimp's revenge, liberating or incarcerating and exterminating such beings, i.e. objection being a routine matter of profit tied to nature as underworld whore versus canonical heroics. Heroes are cops, and all cops are bad, because cops assist in profit, which rapes nature as monstrous feminine by design, i.e. under Pax Americana on stage and off, treating nature as alien horror, as jailers and executioners, but also infiltrators working for the elite, the free component of the land of the free, by enslaving the rest of us to their master's idea of destiny, or a profit tied to geography, cartography, biology, and anything else they want to exploit nature with. Pimps have bosses, little pimps working for big pimps. Not all pimps are bourgeois, but all pimps serve the bourgeoisie. Just as the ancient world relegates to graveyards, death and resurrection become a lineal tradition of survival, i.e. against the state mimicking us, and we them inside the maladaptive ontology readapting itself as needed. Live burial is code to switch through nightmares. The Medusa was killed in her sleep. Endless forms for the whore to assume, let's pimp her as, yet granting endless power to subvert the nuclear model's prison-like relegation of sex to the bedroom through gender trouble and similar virgin whore means of camping the canon. Whores are undertakers that reverse the flow of death, i.e. as guides and witnesses alike, e.g., like Virgil from Dante's Inferno, albeit to a Foucauldian degree of reversal. Capital's toxic sense of home jails labor as something to reclaim inside its gobstopper self. Labor back synonymizes with land back and sex back, or monsters in their symbols, i.e. by breaking the colony, thus the prison down from inside. The alien and its specter of rape haunts the counterfeit, which the state will pimp as usual, but what we as whores must reclaim by reversing objection to break the jail and take what is jailed back from capital, re as a process of abject prostitution, of rapacious cryptonomy, and hauntology, chronotubes. Can you tell the difference? Is the screaming whore apologizing for rape mid-canon's virgin whore syndrome, or conversely defeating it mid-iconoclasm, i.e. as a liminal, dualistic, and anisotropic, therefore ergodic matter of performative irony and calculated risk? A Gothic castle is essentially a brothel, after all, one whose trademark regression yields strange sensations while bypassing odd doors, e.g. Geiger's own Gothic surrealism touching upon the same basic liminalities my book series has. Every Gothic novel has a castle, and every castle houses a bastard or a whore inside. Confronted, the whore says or does something vulgar, canonically damaging the viewer, abjecting them, but iconoclastically helping the witness of the witness exit Plato's cave using darkness visible. Temptation is the order of the day, but also the hyphenation of sex and force, pleasure and pain, etc., speaking to profound survival haunted by Holocaust, clean being a cryptonym for genocide, but also vermin during extermination, thus replacement rhetoric. Whores are classically vermin invading the nuclear home as protected by state proponents, who fetishize their victims born inside said home, per the usual paradoxes afraid of replacement in reverse, a false equivalency made by the colonizer towards their victims, weak and strong but also dead and alive, biomechanical. Whores are born dead, slated for routine fetishization per a genocidal model of Ouroboros exploitation, antagonize nature and put it cheaply to work, me, vis-a-vis Patel, and more. Yet Don Quixote was a simultaneously tragic reliant on illusions while commenting on them per the modern novel, e.g. the imaginary princess Dulcinea foisted onto an ordinary barmaid, or the titular hero tilting at windmills, dragons, and all to continue state force swept up in a love for the barbaric and knightly past, i.e. in ways that continue idiotically into the present Gothic, from valorizing the idiot hero. Impunity is the apex of privilege, but said privilege yields routinely stupid people unused, as whores are, to working within subversive angles that take power back. The praxial difference made opposition isn't aesthetic, but dialectical material context, with Gothic communism emphasizing the social sexual elements per exchange. The anisotropic flow of power going towards the state made objection, or away from it while utilizing the same vampiric means to synthesize praxis. Capital combines corporations with nation-state models, which steal worker rights by design, i.e. we're born into a world where we must fight for our rights against a state being designed to exploit us, the two, thus neoliberalism and fascism when capital decays, forever being at odds, cops and victims, robbers, criminals, etc. Rape is endemic to capital because capital is founded on rape through ontological police abuse, i.e. form follows function, and a cop's a cop, but they occupy the same stages we do, oppositional cryptonymy synonymizing Nazis and communists mid-kayfabe, what we ironically secularized through neo-medieval or Gothic reinvention, e.g. Catholic miracles with vampires, or Jewish myth and Miltonian Satanism with Frankenstein. The state abuses for profit, and has done so since Western antiquity, while the damsel in distress dates back to ancient Greece, requiring a whore to die in order to save a damsel in distress, i.e. Perseus and Andromeda. The medieval period immortalized it with courtly love carried into capitalism and its post-Renaissance fascination with such things. They and the elite stole from the past to continue its worst aspects, i.e. abjection. Ergo, profit equals rape, and cops defend profit through heroic monomythic revenge arguments personified by classically patriarchal token hunter agents, conditioned to attack ontological vice characters, which the horror classically embodies and rails against, i.e. the lady, angel, maiden archetype, on and off stage, i.e. Victoria de Lorendani killing Lila for her soft, childlike qualities. For example, Doomguy the Slayer openly ravishes demons Rambo-style in FPS, while specifically being a reskin of Ellen Ripley's subjugated Amazon pimping the Gorgon whore blamed for her own rape. I.e. witch hunters, dragon slayers, and holy man token parties like the Belmonts, and similar centrist agents, monopolizing what are, for all intents and purposes, modern-day witch hunts stuck inside the same basic dialogues of torture, the vampire killer whip being a slave driver's tool, when not only backed by dogma, but covered in salt to literally rub salt into the wounds of those forced to repent. Canning uses such things to further state hegemony and pimp nature. We whores to liberate all of nature from Western brothels inside brothels, humanizing horror and bastard demon lovers. Konami and Nintendo, among many other corporations overseas or not, pimp from children into adulthood. Armed with stakes, silver bullets, and crucifixes, but also swords, axes, spears, maces, machine guns with grenade launchers, and similar canonical ritualized, therefore fetishized Wunderwaffe implements of torture sanctioned by the state, Canon dresses up its wunderkind, death's head persecution maniacs, in past language, i.e. as virgin horror paradoxes, answerable to no one but themselves inside the usual red-line brothels, prisons, and war zones, neutral pretense of justice. A clever Radcliffean disguise for the pimp's endless revenge, a concealed weapon hiding in plain sight, and recognized to born-again, retro-future context and code calling horrors, however native to the region, being policed, trespassers. Death is the byproduct of capital chasing profit, fetishizing itself through phallicized cultures of war and rape. Palingenesis is criminogenic in service to profit, which we must challenge inside Pax Americana's hellish glass womb, re Plato's cave, and those inside it being slaves to technology, versus freeing themselves from state control through subversive connections and play, hooking up, essentially, with abjection being the ultimate process of division, one whose marginalized infighting said play can counteract. Genocide requires denial to function, meaning on any register combined with codes for violence during moral panic, e.g. slurs, with insults for women or beings forced to identify as women being nigh endless, endlessly used, and sing-songy. Bitch, witch, whore, cunt, hag, slag, nag, slut, harridan, virago, vixen, gold digger, diamond dog, battle axe, and so on. The horror is damned regardless and exploited for consequently speaking out. Compelled like Prometheus to suffer endlessly through the same old double standards, i.e. of a man's world and its selective yet collective punishment, reactive abuse, visiting canonically upon the horror as the aforementioned eagle does, hungry for liver and other tissues, gaslight, gatekeep, girl boss, despoil the cum dump, rinse and repeat. With such a confederacy against her, as Austin put it, what's a girl to do? Survive, for starters, but also speak out during oppositional cryptonymy, getting that bag. There's a fine line between getting by and selling out, mind you. Doing so is less about solving things, in any immediate sense, and more about exploring deep trauma in surface-level ways pursuant to lateral solutions, i.e. then invite a class, race, and or cultural character beyond what is normal, yet embedded in normality through trauma responses wedded to survival mechanisms, societal critiques dressed up in monstrous feminine, therefore commonplace language. The horror is commonplace, affording it a degree of disguise and reach, e.g. demons classically being teaching devices, but also metaphors for changes, including but especially the uncanny and its signature unreality. Something needn't be real to attach to material conditions that shape how we think, i.e. as half-real. When you're being gaslit, as the elite and their servants do to us, A bit of flexibility and experimentation go a long way. The modern world is largely fake, so fight fire with fire, reuniting with alien things to acclimate to state deceptions. Embellishment is crucial. To regress, as the horror does, towards whatever we can in search of answers, however Faustian or elusive, not the future but the past. Embrace it without restraint, for all the dead generations and horrors come and gone. Gothic concerns the return of the past as horror-like, re, from my Metrovenia corpus, one that involves, quote, the exploration of tremendous obscurity, power, and decay from a disadvantaged and erotic social sexual position where a prophesied bastard or whore comes home to roost, i.e. the return of a tyrant or profligate, whose fatal homecoming emerges from a half-formed rogue barbarity, derelict imaginary past, again, usually a castle, but specifically the Black Castle, whorehouse, den of thieves. While said castle's morphology is architectural, its operatic ontology and cryptonymy each bear an oddly horror stamp while furthering or reversing abjection, i.e. seeking revelation and revenge, mise en emblème. Unquote. While capital conceals its own liminal ontology's endless returns, the state rapes by design. They can be revealed through holistic study as returning to old objects and means of study. In turn, liberation happens inside the prison as coming home to roost. A dark inheritance we take and liberate ourselves with, i.e. versus the pimp defending their inheritance, a lie told to the middle class by the elite so they'll continue the structure of profit as usual through inheritance anxiety yielding toxic bloodlines, e.g. the Belmonts and similar fallen houses like the Jedi from Star Wars, proving themselves the state masters, force of will, by recursively punching whores when imperialism comes home to empire. Ari, from Prey's Liberators, quote, when such a castle appears, it is time to be afraid. The colonial harvest is at hand. Yet precisely because the state does not hold a monopoly over violence, terror, and morphological expression, a demon or castle needn't spell our end. It can represent our sole means of attack, reclaiming said poetic's endless inventiveness to turn colonizer fears back into their hopelessly scared brains. Unquote. From Barrow Downs to Gothic castles to liminal danger disco spaces, in general, such opera house, dreamlike spaces of relegation, of shame and sin, hence wet dreams and nightmares, nocturnal emissions including blood, but also wasted semen, speak to unspeakable things nonetheless tied to industry as a banal evil, a one-pimping horse of all different kinds. The slaughterhouse, gladiatorial circuit, duelist arena, toilet, carnival, circus, casino, fairgrounds, amusement park, grand guignol, etc., plantation, jail, torture chamber, and panopticon, beauty pageant, etc., as one and all shackled to the rise of the owner class, the bourgeoisie, through state corporate mergers dating back centuries. The whore sits inside all of these, something to root out, eventually perceived through ergodic, nonlinear motion, a non-singular interpretation, mid-liminal expression, re, sex, drugs, and rock and roll, being as much instruction and rhythm as anything to appropriate by state forces. Yeah, baby, there you go. Fuck mama just like that. Unmoored from pimps, these whorish echoes of incest, rape, and unequal power at large can occur without actual abuse, but generally riff off canonical forms, e.g. Dracula's problematic love and brides. The love that dare not speak its name, predating Jewish blood libel, but having since married to it on a variety of arbitrary flexible persecution languages the state simultaneously pimps out, doubling us. Like Gozer the Traveler's dreaded portal, calculated risk opens the doors of abjection, but also anisotropically reverses the black veil's flow of power. Terrorist counter-terrorist, R.E. Robert Asprey, i.e. choosing the form of the destructor by humanizing the whore in reverse abject dialogues. We have to cross the streams, and that means treating sex work as work. It's the oldest form of work there is, something always in demand. Canon needs whores to further itself in its revenge, whores to speak to the state abusing us, therefore transform it into something better. Said revenge includes speaking out mid-cryptonymy. We're not just whores then, but polyamorous, oft-plural survivors of unspeakable trauma, re. the ghost of the counterfeit reversing or furthering abjection mid-opposition on the aegis. The whore's refrain, sex work is work, and all whores are monsters. Sex work is work, but remains classically over and underrepresented in canon and academia, respectively, as well as unpaid and reviled by bought and paid-for politicians, judges, and cops demonizing nature, i.e. by treating all whores as monsters. Money talks to defend profit as a system of theft built on imperialism and genocide. By comparison, it's our job as whores to change that, extracting value, stolen labor from these devils, thereby working through the usual love-hate relationship whose freakish worship the monomyth crystallizes on all registers. They triangulate violence against nature as monstrous feminine, which we, in turn, must subvert. Re, the whore as secret boss, their fan service assets the engine to continued enslavement and reform, lust or love. The whore is blamed as gold digger through the presumption of automatic ownership of women, but also all of nature by straight white men shaming the slut, or people acting like straight white men. Except the only way capital stops is if universal liberation is achieved, and you can't pick and choose who deserves a fair shake. So often, whores get shamed by other oppressed workers, e.g. The Boondocks' Season 1, Episode 3, basically being sexist vaudeville whose irony doesn't extend to sex workers. From nun to house slave, home equals house is something to gain entry from outside, i.e. through Jameson's dialectic of shelter and subsequent class nightmare, but with Tolkien elements, internalized bigotry, leading past victims to betray other workers, also on the outside, or stealing an insider spot from time to time. In reality, no one's position is secure except for the bourgeoisie. Almost as a fool's errand, then, and one whose spurious utopia workers must walk away from altogether. This dialectic of the alien happens not through smaller pockets of rebellion left to their own devices, but all rebellions banding collectively together against the pimp, i.e. the latter being the same thing as the Nazi, KKK member, or white liberal stabbing you in the back, or convincing you to betray your fellow workers. A cop's a cop, a pimp by virtue of function. Trends and aesthetics don't matter if they assist that process of abjection. To it, whores on something to root out, expose and convert, Radcliffe style, nor bounty to collect, disease to cure, but workers deserving of equal, fair, and ultimately humane treatment, to treat, thus recognize, as being just another form of labor that capital destroys like all others. The whore isn't someone to hate then, but love and embrace alongside other oppressed workers contributing towards a common liberatory goal, i.e. because of the secret knowledge they offer concerning fetishes, kinks, and BDSM to learn from the alien with, thus achieve universal liberation through similarity amid difference, i.e. healing from rape, but there remains someone haunted by unironic terror and violence, echoes of street life brought into the dynastic setting that a revolving court like Dracula and his succubi brides demonstrates, i.e. manufactured consent applies to rape as manufactured, consent for the consumer and not the whore, the latter someone chained to the male gaze, exuding that classic dark surface charged with hellish entropy, and at the same time a repellent push-pull quality that actual black holes don't possess. They're a mirage, a siphon, a ruse, a hot-cold sexpot honey trap to fleece the rubes, i.e. with their ballistic riz and big-titty goth girlfriends fuck-off vibes going both ways, wild sex from a chimeric animal undead demon babes, non-white thickness, regardless of skin color, but also an ace baddie's chance to transform and take power for herself and teach her prey a thing or two. As such, she, and by extension we, regardless of gender, become not just death incarnate, but Medusa reborn through fire and agony, minus the snakes, the mother of the beast, phallic woman, Grendel's mother, the archaic mother, ruling the Zooish slum / Joy Division, Chaucer's Miller's wet dream, something of a revived dark nymph, monstrous feminine pan, thick and hairy, with Lilith's legs rumored to be covered in thick, stocking-like hair, and playing our flutes, or other instruments. It's a lesson, not a punishment, but one where harm and penetration or envelopment aren't off the table. Monster equals alien, but also criminal, a trade, obscene, something of gargantuan, therefore immodest, unvirtuous size, etc., i.e. the phallic woman as having feminine elements, e.g. the whore's monster tits, full of classic revenge, not mother's milk, the milk of human kindness. Quote, "Come, you spirits that tend on mortal thoughts, unsex me here, and fill me from the crown to the toe top full of direst cruelty. Make thick my blood. Stop up the access and passage to remorse. That no compunctious visitings of nature shake my felt purpose, nor keep peace between the effect and it. Come to my woman's breasts, and take my milk for gall, you murdering ministers. Whether in your sightless substances you wait on nature's mischief. Come, thick night, and pall thee in the dunnest smoke of hell, that my keen knife see not the wound it makes, nor heaven peep through the blanket of the dark, to cry, hold, hold." Unquote. But mantras feminine remain mommies all the same, at least in appearance. Mothers of communism is mantras feminine, seeking the horror's revenge on stage and off. To that, the Gothic has been hot, gay, and nerdy, but arguably into sex, drugs, and rock and roll long before 1764, the mode kickstarted by women and gay men. As such, it helps matchmake, i.e. by reintroducing the same disillusioned workforces to a half-forgotten idea of revenge, thus grow accustomed to discouraged modes of poetry, ergo thought, as conducive to the horror's vengeance inside the brothel. For example, the stigma of exposure and consequent sex repulsion generally concerns state abuse, including jails and police violence, i.e. the undead explore trauma and feeding that, while modular, can intersect through strange appetites, to merge phantasmagorically with demonic wishful thinking, guilty pleasure, transformation, and unequal exchange, e.g. killing or fucking your professor and or your boss, as well as monsters of nature whose animalistic egregores explore the above ideas, but also drug-like consumption and embodiment, anthropomorphism, but also fascist aesthetics/camp, e.g. werewolves. All happen through Gothic theater and plays all around reestablishment of trust and boundaries mid-trauma, while putting rape in quotes to achieve what I call Little Gothic BDSM. As such, the Gothic more broadly commonly explores generational trauma in asexual ways, i.e. generally on a social sexual spectrum that includes, among other things, public nudism to exhibit, voyeurize, re the Victorian embodiment and fetishization of madness in the flesh, specifically vasovagal, traumatic penetration, and black and red hysteria, with modular genderqueer elements that state recuperates alongside everything else. Re the phallic woman above, related to Freud's archaic mother vis-a-vis Creed's work salvaging him, and me having both authors. Robust jugs, whose infernal pitchers, a sultry disguise, and open secret dinner bell, hold the vitalistic give-take vampiric secrets of nature in and upon themselves. A taste for life as forbidden and erotic, but also foreboding and satanic. Mommy's got what you need, come hither. But her shapely body can take a pounding from all angles, i.e. she's Bruce Lee on a skateboard, with a black corset, thong, choker, opera gloves, and stilettos, read, phallic pareidolia, and function, high heels, thigh highs, both over the top and understated courtier, while her shuddering pussy drools and growls with rapturous animal excitement. She finds her lack of faith among the churchly whorehouse's kinky chaos disturbing. The beast with two backs, she makes her own exclusive clubs, stretching on to the crack of doom, echoes of the witches from Macbeth. You've got to pay the troll toll to get in. The vampire's incestuous master-slave echoes of sleep sex. Feminine or otherwise, monsters testify to rape is a matter of preferential code. So despite the Pillow Princess refrain, the best romance isn't gentleness alone, and this is coming from someone who loves slow, deep missionary sex. Like everything else, capital has alienated labor from the fact that, along with sex and death as a whole, sex, even healthy sex where harm is absent and consent assured despite the risks, re. rack, has a fair amount of actual pain, data, but also performative violence and genuine roughness to it, which isn't the same thing as harm, despite any steam let off appearing or sounding harmful to non-participants, i.e. the neo-Gothic love for replica, egregore, simulacrum, counterfeit, and miniature facsimile, small or giant, re. Walpole's giant homunculus, the suit of armor from Otranto symbolic of a burgeoning capitalist scene, e.g. faking an orgasm not so different from Uncle Bruce, holding a punch and grimacing while shouting loudly for the camera, through glorious 1970s dubbing, "Why did you kill my teacher?" Sex and death, war overlap, oxymorons alluding to harm, but also existence through curiously exaggerated yet inadequate phrases, e.g. little death, hit it, choke me, or slay that pussy, versus total unmitigated hyperbole, well at home in camp as endemic to Gothic, music to Medusa's ears. Everyone loves the whore, but capital loves her for toxic reasons, i.e. as a peach to harvest in perpetuity. In keeping with imperial inheritance fears, the West fears the whore's revenge replacing them, e.g. white supremacists chanting, "We will not be replaced" at Charlottesville, while being alienated from women, i.e. for every virgin, female or otherwise, you have a whore threatening to replace the bride or groom by virtue of succession as a matter of violence through sex, courtship, a bat-like belle of the bowl, a walking nightmare for the prudish and self-righteous, the fearsome queen of the Reich, well-versed in the usual bastardized language of power and death, the shadow of extermination, per state corporate models, but also its heteronormative, patriarchal double standards, and male gaze fetishizing such things, choking the release valve. Her power is fake capitalism? So is yours, my dudes, and death comes for us all. Let's see who wins, your lance or mine. And Amazon classically being a militant horror, a pissed-off naked woman, or anyone treated like a woman who can throw down and get down. Misery loves company. She's the wandering Jew. Her body, its shapely tush, massive rack, and tight little box, the lament configuration, reifying hell, the twilight zone, and purgatory, all rolled into one, a fabulous disaster, composite sale of indulgences framed by the state as essentialized evil, i.e. what Creed calls the murderous womb, except horrors classically breed through demons and other illegitimate spawn, such hysterical reproduction and fragmented cryptomimesis tied to dark wishes of revenge, Lilith onwards, and whose summoning demands payment of all kinds, including adoration, re an animal woman tied to vampire bats, but also Medusa's snakes, Black Widow, spiders, and similar demonized elements of nature pimped by capital as usual, a chimera of sin, specifically lust, a furry without fur, a lycanthrope to panic about while taming the savage mid-Amazonamachia. Canonical or not, the horror is always a little off limits, and all the hotter for it, re the horror's revenge being to have fun while twisting normies into knots. Medusa expresses a perceived immunity to dogma and charm, making her something of a give-zero fucks career girl whose badass end absolutely knows it, the fifth rider of the apocalypse, a hellion sorceress of battlestorms, where armies tremble in fear. Since gasping its first terrifying breath, the Gothic shows us history's plasticity, doing so through a trademark disdain for boundaries, thus bans, but also its formidable tolerance for pain and transgression. The mode is utterly rife with paradox, oxymoron, and gender trouble, meaning when worker counter-terror challenges state monopolies, stochastic terrorism, but also broader categorical, ontological, or otherwise mischief that monsters, female, feminine, or not, can inflict against the nuclear mode through fatal vision, as the Gorgon does, through parody and pastiche, half-real, living on video, a vanishing point of concentric Semitic wreckage whose accretion disk place of concealment stands on ashes of something not quite present, i.e., according to class, culture, and race remediated, monster trouble. I'm coining that one, Judith Butler, alongside my monopoly of monsters, the numinous, versus Espray's paradox of terror, and Weber's monopoly of violence. Power is ours in ways we can perform using what we got, both not in our hands, I clutch thee but have thee not, while simultaneously being what we were born with, i.e. as extra-dimensional, eternal, out of this world, e.g. angel witches' massive tits and butt below. Sex is power, including asexual dialogues about sex to Gothic when in Rome. So enchant this, Radcliffe. Such wicked, topsy-turvy testimony is the horror's revenge, the sexy miniature or portrait coming alive and feeling all the better for defying God, the state by having fun, i.e. the Gothic loves its Gollum-esque oxymorons and gargoyle throwbacks, death and pleasure occupying the same place we horrors use to pass iconoclastic data along. A dance, a dalliance, a duel that stresses the physical, spiritual, emotional, and ontological psychosexual nature of things by hyphenating sex and force, food, sickness, war, etc., through a monstrous feminine bent which the state will police, thus pimp, ever and always. Fate personified, the horror embodies sex as jilted, becomes a kind of battle that draws you close, gets one's licks in, and retreats from striking distance. Fear and fascination with fascism, re Sontag with a twist, combine upon within the femme fatale as a neoclassic love bomb, the black penitent with nothing to confess and everything to lose and gain, the bounty and the bandit, the widow and the recluse, the attendant to our darkest desires, including society's need to be close to dangers both invented and actual during calculated risk. There is a dichotomy at play at work mid-opposition. The pimp treats war and rape as a red-line territory to occupy and immiserate through police-state moral panic annex, but also a suspension of disbelief tied to state enemies sold back to consumers chasing the dragon. The horror walks the tightrope, weaving powerful spells of death and love, of fight, flight, and fawn, to survive by taking control back and paying rent. So does the horror's revenge challenge the pimp's revenge against the numinous, a standard tokenized pimp avenging their loss by punishing the horror for the very disobedience that the pimp paradoxically demands of them. By comparison, the horror's revenge breaks profit on her backside, less genocide along with it during power struggles big and small. i.e. by taking the weapons, thus monopolies of violence, terror, and monsters back through the usual fetishes, castles, and the flesh. The more you whip me, the more you tire. I love it. I'm still alive, burning in hell is something I bring to earth. Numinous isn't a casualty, but end goal. It's important, and more to the point, foundational to the Gothic as a critical device breaking capitalist realism with. As such, the Gothic transcribes, transforms, translates, and preserves. It endures, dealing in death as a silly, serious bad joke that is grave and cool, fun and forsaken, i.e. horrors are cool and streetwise, but off limits, paywalled by canon until genocide is done, e.g. Samus Aran finally showing some skin after you blow up a planet. Such is the horror from antiquity into the present world, wet nurse to misery and delight, the competent death dealer living in the shadow of rape and war while lulling their prey to sleep for trying to spank the horror to death, to take eventually from them their power, but also give something back to new students, the youthful lovers. Something is always given back for exchange. Trauma, for the horror, lives in their flesh, and exacts from it and ours mid-mortification. Black equals death as much as religion, Gothic thriving on cryptonomy and its ambiguity, as well as numinous rewards desecrating the state, fatal knowledge during Promethean quests, re Metroidvania, and similar stories where the hero is dwarfed by their surroundings, literally being dead empires, i.e. Ozymandias syndrome. To it, the complexities of modern life cannot fully separate danger and delight mid-comfort. Yet all the same, everything is alien and fetish to some social sexual degree, i.e. the Gothic interrogates generational trauma as living in and around our bodies, negotiating with things we can never fully extract, and for which state proponents will be drawn towards to siphon from us anew. For good or for ill, trauma attracts trauma, weird attracts weird, and data is a process of pollination among a social sexual species of horrors, e.g. Kuo and I, exchanging our own data below to reanimate our revenant selves with their robust boy pussy and my Goldilocks girl cock docking for much needed release. But the state is always a pimp, perpetually seeking victims to profit off of, the patriarchal necromancer or token matriarch, whoring Medusa as undead animal demon, playing on words interwoven with poison as the cure angry mothers, and falling in Medusa's footsteps. As such, whores are bait, and Gothic canon, bewitching pretty penny predators of the night, capable of seductive violence with a poisonous element, re Victoria de Lorendana using poison as well as knives, but ultimately a freak show attraction, uppity merchandise meant to keep customers coming back for more, thus paying out till the cows come home. But this, too, cuts both ways, is something the state doesn't monopolize, nor its infernal concentric pattern and deviant contents, with all the horrors featured here being paid ventures, i.e. for this book series, endorsing paid labor as essential to communist development. Power decays and rebuilds, its coming accretion all part of the same oppositional cryptonomy playing at incest to wicked parentage, e.g. Walpole's mysterious mother doubling down on the idea. The fear of inheritance is secret sin, an untold tale that art cannot extract nor penance cleanse. So come to mommy, little one. The horror classically touted as fake, deviant, asking for it. Halloween, once a celebration of death and labor tied to nature, has well and truly been corporatized. That's what we're up against. With Trick or Treat, for us harlots and hellions becoming a deadly game made fun once more. For us, Halloween is year-round, the neo-medieval's tacky surrealism, a rebellious way of existence, i.e. one that challenges profit during a rememory of horrors dead or alive, then and now. Rememory is a dollhouse, but also a sex doll back from the grave with a vengeance. Every Russian doll holds an Iron Maiden, the rebel both completely fake, tied to an imaginary past and something haunted equally, with commodified assimilation, controlled opposition, cornering the market that we must challenge again. Upon the usual echoes of dynastic primacy and hereditary rights, i.e. sex and force, re Bakhtin, the Gothic chronotope, the castle, composed of egregores, medieval miracles, puns, and displaced flying icons of sin, is a power to counteract state devils and their bread and circus opiates amounting to little more than junk food, echoes of sugar and other luxuries made cheap by capital. See Patel and Moore's A History of the World and 7 Cheap Things. Speaking of junk food, a witch cop and victim both use the same Halloween-style costumes to achieve completely different aims, state preservation versus transformation of the state. State varieties are always expendable, Medusa's something to slay to keep capital's crimes from coming to light. So do they pimp the beyond, recruiting from various underworlds to better install the usual patsies and monomyth legends, i.e. that spuriously invalidate any doubles, ours, outside themselves, Any fake the state abuses, we lurk on the same surfaces while inside the same live burial thresholds. RE, graveyard sex communicating through trauma, feeding and exchange, transformation evoking the return of undead and demonic, animal forces that whores adumbrate. We rebellious whores refuse to tokenize, but revel in our alien power as yearning to be freed from state control as genocide, through mimicry and disguise as primordial survival mechanisms, the whore cloning herself to live on like Sadako Yamamura of Ringu fame. Hogel correctly argues how monsters and taboo subjects, e.g., rape, death, and cannibalism, are incredibly popular according to the abjection process as furthered by the middle class's own bogus media, i.e., Hogel argues that modern Gothic is grounded in fakery. Neato, except there's no monopoly on monsters. Hence the horror in their stacked castle-like bodies own quasi-ecclesiastical facades and viral cryptomimetic curse attached to such churches in small, speaking to capitalism and genocide, i.e. the horror is a relic of the imaginary past, and its fakes, communicating as much through pain regarding repressed harm as anything explicitly pleasurable. The whores love to blur the lines, i.e. Radcliffe's demon lovers, and exquisite torture. The Gothic is ambiguous, sarcastic, and ironically silly, demented in ways that, while they can historically resist the danger of singular state interpretations, just as often oblige state realities, i.e. of the ruling class demanding dead whores to progress into their own charnel houses, objects of funerary revenge, to cattle and attack, thus slaying ways we can camp, re. the whore's revenge versus the pimps, one dismantling profit through Gothic poetry and theatric displacement, among other things, and the other aiding in profit by signing nature's monstrous feminine death warrant. Darkness Visible sits within the usual bastardized conventions. A pissed-off naked lady, who bereft of virtue, will happily reach out from hell to stab a bitch. Whores are classically criminals a priori, subject to the very omerta capital violates to abuse their childlike, verminous assets for profit, something to breed, yet treat like spawn, like Dracula's brides, like xenomorphs, etc. Said cryptonomy is oppositional, i.e. a good whore can camp their own abuse during Little Gothic BDSM, while owning the aesthetic the state hogs, e.g. graveyard sex, but also murder sex, re. a hego. Whores are, among other things, star-crossed profligates tied to disease, sin, and criminal enterprise, which capital, under liberalism, tiers according to established pyramids of sin, guilt, and blame, i.e. scapegoating the whore and nature as hysterical through Darvo and obscurantism, e.g. groomer allegations. If drag queens were fucking your children, they'd be covered in glitter. Yet wicked bad naughty zoots left her grail beacon on. A similar cautionary adage applies to overeducated women, cis or not, being treated simultaneously as property that, should it be able to think for itself, might tempt state benefactors and or seek revenge, like Frankenstein's monster. I.e. the Gothic heroine, a detective threatened by ghosts of dead whores, they effectively exercise through hauntological detective work, exploring the castle, mansion, and or haunted house by candle, torch, oil lamp, or flashlight. Whatever the victim, the home in Gothic is always Promethean, fallen, and God is dead, except the nuclear scapegoat is always a monstrous feminine whore, bastard, rapist simulacrum from elsewhere, e.g. the whore living in sin, the trans woman in delusion, etc. Furthermore, this paradoxical witnessing through Rashomon-style half-truths can be expressed in any kind of monstrous feminine as such, i.e. beyond Creed's Freudian bad bitches refusing to be victims of a conspicuously female, admittedly at times token design, with Gothic and anarcho-communism being a composite holistic enterprise of revolutionary cryptonomy on the same half-real surfaces, inside the same magic circle thresholds, opposing state doubles, re. witch cops. Nature and poetry comprise of endless varieties in duality that include cishet women, but really any marginalized or police group under the sun that said language can describe at cross purposes, for workers reversing objection of the state eating us by policing nature as monstrous feminine, with nature as monstrous feminine. Horrors take endless shapes because the state requires tokenization to be endless, thus exploit labor as much as it possibly can. There is always another whore to pimp, Pygmalion style, another world to conquer as Alexander once wept about. For the state, the whore is always alien. Haunting home is soaked in genocidal whore's blood, native blood, outgroup blood, i.e. some degree of criminal, outsider, and perpetrator, homewrecker menacing the nuclear model, or chained to it like a radiator, a makeshift ball and chain, during the whore's paradox, the nadir cum dump to despoil and dehumanize, the slave to whip, the native to eliminate. There is no monopoly on victimhood, but capital, by definition, needs a victim to rape. Thus polices the whore as the OG source of Armageddon, i.e. the state blaming the victim starting with the whore, as something that would extend into other marginalized groups for capital policing such things to wider intersectional degrees. Canonically, the whore must be gagged, shackled, closeted, and or killed. Let civilization fall. The classic gaslight. We can't pay unpaid laborers because profit would disappear. Such is capitalist realism, including the neoliberal period's endless military optimism, RE through video games, said games and their multimedia offshoots immortalizing Rambo and Ripley as the usual standard token cops of the Gorgon, i.e. gentrifying and decaying into toxic forms, the fatal cheapening of nature through labor's assimilation. A pimp is a pimp, the testimony of those beyond the black veil recuperated by the state, i.e. the latter controlling opposition through horrors it can never fully quell, but can gag through theatrical force as unto itself a pimping mechanism, the vice character, which the whore again ultimately exemplifies, giving our joyless lives a bit of color through guilty pleasures and endless wish fulfillment, e.g. black being the color of horrors and green the color of stigma and envy, among other things. Except there's no limit to rebellion, because that's what existing for the whore ultimately is, a Valkyrie, freed on medias res, under state duress, liberating oneself by transforming the state as an army of whores exerting themselves to defy gravity. Worship Satan all you like, just don't be a Nazi about it. There is a balance, e.g. Tolkien and Cameron canonized Milton, but we don't have to. Labor and its dark forces, which the whore again embodies, take infinite form, thus have infinite power insofar as exploitation and liberation both go, to make genocide palatable, but also bearable while surviving it. There's no way to validate ourselves without reclaiming said language and its betrayals, i.e. as whores in service to ourselves fucking back, including the usual cops and robbers rivalry the state uses to pimp persecute us with, during recursively staged yet seasonal moral panics, replacing thus exterminating us. On loop, and on brand, the holy man stakes the vampire, or exorcises dark spirits. The plague doctor cures the disease. Sickness, be gone! The hunter burns the witch at the stake, and shoots the werewolf through the heart. The monomyth warrior beheads Medusa, and the noir detective or gothic heroine gets to the bottom of things that smell fishy, re, horrors, regardless of the aesthetic at play, e.g. cowboy, knight, barbarian, etc. A cop is a cop, their violence mere force of will, might makes right. Horrors are things to summon, then kettle and push around. To it, we want to become opposition that, like Medusa herself, cannot be entirely controlled or fully tokenized, cured, or cleansed, i.e. by breaking the monopolies of violence, terror, and monstrous bodily expression the state, since its inception, and certainly since the Victorian era, has used to treat sexuality, and by extension the people who do sex work, as unspeakable aliens, re, horrors, which the police, actual or de facto, can pimp, less brutalize with impunity during the abjection process. However dressed up these arguments are, or aren't, they boil down to states' rights versus worker rights, and the rights of animals and the environment, which translate easily enough to pimps versus whores. Challenging the pimp requires listening to the whore when they sing their tone poem stories, celebrating unknown pleasures behind the black veil that, with the ages, suddenly appear on the other side, or transport us straight to hell, to look on the aegis and convert to the Gorgon's cause, e.g. the curse of undeath classically coming from a kiss on the neck. A chorus of profligates, or all whores are monsters struggling to survive, recognizing my friend's help and value in this project. Silence is genocide, and few things speak louder than sexy monsters chanting to the rafters they built themselves, an anti-church, but also anti-state, which Gothic communism is. The Gothic calicates, and all whores are monsters tied to sex, where the curse haunting the Gothic fake, the toxic waste that turns people green, the statue that speaks, the ghost of the counterfeit reversing objection to usual saucy temptations, sex worker survival, the kind of testimony that speaks to the whore's transfer of power through sex as a means of trade during survival sex work. Ari Mugi is a survival sex worker who, like all sex workers, faces unequal degrees of oppression, with Mugi being plural and disabled as well as a trans-masked parent, whose more relative privilege must assist those with more relative privilege must assist in light of capital pimping the vulnerable alien. We whores play devil's advocate to ourselves mid-courtship on a social sexual spectrum, combating racism, sexism, transphobia, whorephobia, i.e. as radical intersectional bigotries that require as such radical intersectional solutions, often Sisyphean laughter and love, i.e. you gotta laugh. Eat the apple, babes. We're the apple workers must learn from, with Mugi, a delicious orchard below. Top or bottom, we fought back for communism, on the aegis, to meddle, for shits and giggles, but also to own the means of production. Time to make a deposit at the spank bank, but cross the banker's palm with silver first, then dance the devil's dance when he extends his hand. Abstinence merely a form of alienation, segregation during the abjection process. Come get some turned back on Ash Williams' smug visage, so-called soul-swallowing, speaking to hag horror more broadly, not just Ramey's, as lurking behind comely maidens threatening state virtue, namely semen, a failure to keep it in one's pants. Being a Gothic ludologist, pornographic historian, much of the Gothic and its poetic histories are born. Multimedia and BDSM expert, sex worker, and all-around invigilator of popular media, i.e. sex, drugs, and rock and roll, but also video games being how people communicate. I've not only drawn, but written a lot about Amazons, the Medusa, Amazonomachia, and Creed's Monstrous Feminine, as well as Metroidvania, Tolkien, and Ludo-Gothic BDSM, combined holistically with those, i.e. mid-study and performance, per revisitation unfolding like a kind of stand-up, burlesque, or performance art, which includes public nudity and sex, all for we whores to challenge capitalist realism's cryptonomy process, ergo tokenism and profits, usual state tools and Cartesian heteronormative and secular colonial qualities, during rape play inserting irony, zero harm, alongside exploitation, mid-liberation. Previously I mentioned Valkyries, and I have written about them elsewhere, re, quote, in times of crisis the self-styled righteous beyond reproach are systemically the most guilty and dangerous, demonstrably kettling the women, children, and minorities they fear to pimp them as alien. But revolutions go both ways, the Medusa speaking through us on the aegis, and us to our enemies through our nude flashing of the Gorgon's power to have the whore's revenge. We can't rely on the police to protect us because comps pip whores to defend property and capital rapes by design. We must be our own Valkyrie, defending our homes from these cheap, creepy thugs, i.e. exposing them as the dorky pimps they are, licking the state's boots. So when the man comes round, show him your aegis and let him testify to his own treachery when angrily trying to closet you. Segregation and silence are no defense, so no pasaran. Unquote. I.e. a kind of classically female warrior, monstrous feminine, not unlike Amazons, but also hags, witches, and oracles. Also classically, they were the gaslight gatekeeper girl bosses of the ancient world into capital, i.e. at the present space and time, which we can camp, preventing genocide by denying the very token betrayals that lead to Holocaust. Men, but especially straight men, or people acting like straight men, love their artifacts of power, their crowns, scepters, and swords, etc., wielded by Campbell's hero with 1,000 faces, pimping the whore across hell's half-acre. For women and minorities, by comparison, their power can reify through prurient offshoots, e.g. a queenly crown or witch's broom, but just as often from the powers of the underworld being rooted firmly in their whore-like bodies. What the state tries to control by pimping as forces of nature to exploit from Columbus, Descartes, and Bacon onwards, but from the older patriarchs of an pre-Enlightenment globe. Infinite power means infinite exploitation for whores to subvert through numinous relegation rising to the surface, i.e. through non-binary and non-Vitruvian means, e.g. BBWs, fat, trap, and similar pornographic labels used one and all to pimp nature as reprobate. The whore can tease and coax through such things, but just as easily throws their weight around to crush naysayers flat, to administer punishment through its usual vectors in reverse, Doom Guy style, from fully alive to more and more dead, or vice versa. Let's not stand on ceremony here. Stand and be recognized, my friends. We're talking about a revolution. When the castle of the tyrant appears, don't freeze and flee from its liminal ontology of war. Humanize the harvest to expose the state as inhumane. Become the Valkyrie who transforms Valhalla from within, the peach and the knife, your castle a necropolis of music and motion, galvanizing new Frankensteinian histories while lost inside. Each of you is a fortress, a dark cathedral of delightful wonder viewed from all angles, explored recursively and ergotically and concentrically, a kind of asexual cubism viewed from all sides minus Picasso's pedophilia and caustic sexism. The spirit of the great destroyer lives in you, labyrinthine likenesses of the Gorgon turning capital to stone. Horrors are down to earth, but also are the earth. i.e., they get down to business as dirty as the soil of the grave, but full of nutrients, and life itself has, suitably enough, tied to death, big and little, spoof to death, bound to the same ancient equation, canon treating the horror ever and always as ancient necrophilia enemies to the state raping them through monomythic force, and singing about these eyes of confusion to stab, per rites of passage sacrificing the usual horrors. State heroism polices sex through force, the former policed far more than the latter by virtue of the state needing sex to exist, despite so-called monopolies on terror and violence. It requires constant misuse of sex, which people like my friends below reclaim on the aegis. The mystery of sex causating the horror, or setting her free by fucking her in taboo ways, e.g. grave robbing and the fetishizing nature of nameless horrors who either feel dead before their time or are conjured up through Gothic play with dead things to speak to secrets of abuse. A corpse on stage is generally not an actual corpse, but painted in doll-like ways to resemble one. Regardless, the cop always underestimates his victims, adjusting to what said victims control as a means of charms for him to resist. Or not. E.g., the lonely doctor seeking love, but also said love seeking him. I.e., sex is camouflage, seeming soft and tender to the desperately lonesome chaser, but upon and inside themselves the horror shows the immeasurable might of the Medusa laid bare. You never really know someone until you work with them, including sex. The point is conversation through art, which includes the Gothic, and porn is artistic through conversations about, among other things, dead horrors revived in theatrical language, not just hundreds but thousands of years old. With Rob Zombie's corpse painted bride from The Living Dead Girl, evoking the graveyard horrors of ancient Rome. Death is simultaneously sacred and not, with the Gothic profaning the sacred by playing with it in ostensibly criminal ways that in point in fact are perfectly legal. In short, it's what me and my equally whorish friends below make up through this series, thus have made, and are made, of ourselves, an army of queer folk and sex workers whose satanic apostasy, for all intents and purposes, versus the state pimping us in essentially the same lingual material ways, regardless of how different each case might, on the surface, within thresholds, harm is harm. And our creative successes abjure that, by camping actual violations of our basic human rights, re necrophilia above, a corpse unable to consent, re is something to challenge the state by fostering our own creative successes of proletarian praxis, and whose mutual consent, informed consumption and informed consent, sex-positive de facto education, descriptive sexuality, and cultural appreciation boil down to sex positivity and liberation versus sex coercion while developing Gothic communism, with a huge focus on resisting tokenization, e.g. TERFs. Behold the teachers of an alternate past, thus possible future, we whores dead or alive, camping canon because we must, so is little Gothic BDSM, and Gothic communism is something I found on all these beauties. To speak out is to survive, segregation no defense. Capital is not merely a gravesite, but crime scene of potential rape as much as actual. It also one we place in quotes based on yesterday's ambiguously consensual spoofs. E.g., she's the cunt that thought she was God, but that's okay. I don't give a shit, as long as she sucks me off when I tell her, because she's my zombie. I captured that motherfucker, and she's my cassette. Unquote. We have to be our own zombies, not the sex slaves of fringe mentalities bringing imperialism home to empire. Rarely evoking what's essentially fascism by proselytized by a mentally ill homeless person above. But the zombie horrors who bring Medusa back to life as a liberating force, one alive in all of us. Bunny, you've taught me a lot about asexuality and public nudism over the years, using these to interrogate trauma through Gothic performance, e.g. panal and clown sex. You're a rock star and incredibly sweet person, without which sex positivity and little Gothic BDSM wouldn't exist as they do presently. Victoria, your feedback in regards to my own survivor's testimony of my own rape has helped me conceptualize a voice to speak more clearly about rape survival, be that my own or in relation to other people's. Tooth, you're an incredibly sweet and loving person, so much that my nickname for you was Sweet Tooth. I hope you're well, my friend. Taylor and husband, you're both exceptionally easy to work with and hot, so much so that I get excited every time I talk to you. KF Sunshine, a newcomer to the project, but one whose boundless enthusiasm and excellent end product made me feel lucky to find you last minute. Beat, keeper of chickens and kitties with a fat Jewish ass, your words. The fact that you can quote Jabberwocky and Ozymandias from memory blows my mind. Also, learning about world history from you has been a treat. Angel Witch, someone I've worked with for a long time. You've always respected my boundaries and been clear with your own, and you are frankly one of the hottest people I've worked with physically, which just synergizes wonderfully with how kind and considerate you are. Also, your outfits kick total ass. Vera, mommy doms are my jam, and you're one of the best. Soft pleasure doms for the win. Thank you for supporting my work and reading so much of it in your spare time. Crow, my sweet marshmallow wolf. Though our relationship has changed to become more romantic and less sexual since we first met, I love you more and more, and am very proud of you. Moogie, a good friend, you've stood by my side since befriending each other. I appreciate you showing solidarity and continuing to work with me, producing amazing content as you did. Bay, my sweet space dog. Thank you for giving me the inspiration needed to write my PhD, and for sitting through my entire initial manuscript as I read it to you. You radicalized my work more than it already was, are stewards of nature, and it brought constant joy and sunshine into my life. Note, these models were specifically commissioned to appear in this grand finale, i.e. with me reaching out to them across the month of May, and several in late April, e.g. Blood Bunny and Angel Witch, to appear here, and something we agreed to in advance, e.g. Crow and I, above. Since its inception, Gothic communism has been founded on mutual informed consent, not coercion, i.e. as something to illustrate via dialectical material, context, scrutiny, and study, as educational devices. As with all collaborators for my book project, our negotiations were paid based on mutual agreements, i.e. meant to go into the context of any images being shown to help illustrate mutual consent, as persuasive by virtue of its labor fiscal elements. Not all of these models are muses of mine, but some are. To see all the reviews for models that I have written, as well as all my muses, go to my website's sex work page. Conversely, to see everyone involved with sex positivity as a whole, go to my acknowledgements page. Mercenary muses from the island of Misfit Toys, from Wonderland, Narnia, or the Castle of Otranto, any operatic danger disco place to go and experience, give voice to what capital has alienated workers from, re the palliative numinous. You are not ghosts to exorcise or bandits to expose, banish, and arrest, but almost holy specters of Mary Shelley and Karl Marx, paradoxical beings, blurring the lines between pleasure, pain, predator, prey, have not, fight, flight, friend, foe, and familiar, foreign, etc., as something unique yet uncanny to worship, adore, fear, and play with mid-oscillation, the Gothic's classic push-pull sensation. To it you echo the fates, the Gorgon, Titania, in A Midsummer Night's Dream, whose dream hath no bottom. Embellishment is your dullest trade. Expressing power is something to find and explore through little Gothic BDSM, as relayed on and across the social sexual gradient. Female or not, my book series is full of such subversive cuties sharing the stage, in which, while I'm the art director and primary writer, illustrator, and funder of the larger project you're reading about here, all have minds and hearts of their own to camp canon with, i.e. on individual stages that sometimes cross over into others, heaven and hell, or go off stage into regular earthly domains. Standing in defiance of a routine rising tyranny endemic to capital, their aegis is the door to the whore's revenge, Medusa the archaic mother, queen ghost of the counterfeit, again speaking through us and our work that we denude, bare and strong like Amazons, versus the fascist cult of the strong man, or strong woman, non-binary person, re. Autumn Ivy in the nation-state. So finish strong, my little avenging angels, you readers, that is. No one ever meaningfully challenged fascism by being polite to Nazis, or holding back against their many degrees of weirdness. Widespread issues require widespread participation to overcome silence, shame, and stigma as normally compelling omission, abjecting to horror. Rape is a silent sin offloaded classically onto women, or those treated like women, e.g. trans men like Moogie, above. I.e. as the ones asking for it, as if all we ever wanted was equal treatment, equal pay in a world where rape doesn't exist. Is that really so much to ask? Furthermore, radical intersectional bigotries, re. imbricating persecution networks, discussing witchcraft, blood libel, and sodomy accusations first and foremost, require radical intersectional solutions, and fascists are dorks who worship false strength and fatal Gamergate nostalgia tied to an equally false, harmful imaginary past, e.g. that guy from the Chronicles of Riddick who Carl Urban worships through Nazi space dogma. He's a holy half-dead who's seen the underverse. So was the Wizard of Oz, a hypocrite witch hunter weaponizing children to kill witches, thus whores, for the Emerald City, almost by another name. The best way to expose a hypocrite is through horrors taking such things back, on the aegis, with the same aesthetics laid bare to expose genocide. Never surrender. Fight them and their paper tiger censorship, thus genocide, silence, every step of the way. Remind them the king hangs the hangman on his own rope, laughing at the Roman fool, so afraid of death, he thought he could avoid dying by eating his own friends, and eventually himself, toe to top. A fatal portrait showing the cracks in canonical law on and off stage, the horse hoist pimps on their own petards. This revelation, remember, requires our part in a larger song of infinity, reshaping the wisdom of the ancients. Camping the canon to achieve infinite power according to where power is always found, concentrically within, around us as dark warrior, and monstrous feminine sex symbols, meson and bime, i.e. breaking state monopolies on violence, terror, and monstrous expression, ergo strength in masculine and or feminine forms. Take it, land, labor, and love, back upon yourselves. All the dead horrors of past generations weigh like a nightmare on the brains of the living who worship the state. Our power fantasies must counter theirs in what they stand for, not just pimping nature through increased neoliberal division, efficient profit, and infinite growth, but literally embodying and policing these things in duality versus us while in proximity. Mother is the name for God on the lips and hearts of all children. My mom's cooler than yours. A Polaroid taken of my mother when she was younger, shortly after the fall of the Soviet Union, i.e. circa 1991, while hanging with the Red Army. Mom's incredibly educated, but one whose streetwise past ensures that she always has a trick or two up her sleeve. She also gave me a room of one's own, in essence funding my entire book series. The exploitation of mothers and educated women is a very old theme, with the Gorgon famously being the mother of monsters begot from rape, re in one's sleep, fast, loose, and scarlet, a force of nature commonly called wandering womb, hysteria, wicked, and so on. Trauma begets trauma, but also attracts it, and often in maladaptive ways, re me vis-a-vis Jadis, Zool, and Kubu, while struggling to bond and learn from others with similar struggles, often preying on me. It behooves us not merely to listen, then, but embody such things in positive, healthy ways, i.e., as human beings reclaiming the mendacious language of alien to honor and remember older survivors, having paid the rent and told a few lies to make ends meet, us being the result of various oopsies. The state is classically white, straight, and male. Female examples always token by virtue of Beauvoir's admittedly inadequate phrase, woman is other. My work, and by extension my friend's work married to mine, expands on that, i.e. by fighting for universal liberation versus female tokenization, but whose series still started from what Ma taught me when I was little. Don't hit women, Stalin sucks, and tip your sex workers. Let's unpack that. Double time it, babes. A crescendo, Medusa, iconoclast, warrior, and spy. All language is dualistic. Medusa, the ghost of the counterfeit, lives not just in our zombie brains, but undead babies reversing objection during the horror's revenge, e.g. from Mom with the Red Army, to little old me critiquing Marxist-Leninism as much as the West, no homeless, my dudes, i.e. her sickly strong babes of the dark scary woods or otherwise, in and not in the blood, social and material conditions, illustrating mutual consent as sexy through the superstructure in the face of those sick with virgin whore and mirror syndrome who don't value consent, favoring coercion of whores and brides alike. Do you want to live forever? Love is a battlefield of courtly love, the Galatia escaping Pygmalion's patriarchal shadow to break the monomyth cycle of kings within the infernal concentric pattern, R.A. Tolkien and Cameron's refrains, the high fantasy treasure map, and shooter Metroidvania. All war is predicated on deception, said Sun Tzu. The same goes for whores, waging class, culture, and race war during the cryptonomy process, reversing objection with masks and costumes, e.g. animal skins, teeth, and bones, but also bodies and art, as well as poetic extensions, aggregores of those things, cryptomimetically on and on. Strength combines masculine and feminine, but also stealth and exposure mid-kayfab, onstage and off, during canon versus camp, and praxial opposition. It's bound to get messy, because revolution is messy at its core, in which the state will try its best to infiltrate and tokenize our movement. But the revolutionary strength of the Amazon is breaking said chains, thereby showing off her classically naked power in voyeur exhibitionist ways that in our subversive hands and theater of domination and bondage defy profit as a structure, a vertical power arrangement and abuse, endless freak show invasions, inequality and harm, rape or otherwise compelled sex extending to forced labor of all kinds, Again, the difference between cop and rebel is function, the rebellious whore using the outlaw aesthetic to place power systemically in worker hands, e.g. not just the Amazon, but the knight or Ronin below, i.e. to defend all of nature, as all whores, from state predation. We share the same stage as they do, doubling our enemies to invite for trouble in comparisons, to burst their bubbles or busting our knots. Death on two legs? Get it, girl! Pirates are cool. Ninja pirates are cooler still. So be brave, join hands and collectively expose the enemy as fallible, false, and cruel, but also embarrassingly stupid, afraid of the voices of those they abuse, treating the hearing of such testimony as death. Below. Our unity is their kryptonite, their Achilles' heel having fetishized us beings of dark, vengeful nature into nothing they fear more than death itself. Your power comes from us, embodying the river Styx you merely bathed in. Now stare and tremble. Exposure, revelation, is what they fear most of all, so make them face it, on the mirror, in multi-sensual combinations, i.e. a confusion of the senses, selective absorption, and magical affinity, assembly, during the Song of Infinity as penned by us. God, what awful racket, indeed, Waard not actually being an acronym, but onomatopoeia, like many battle cries. Poison was the cure, noise pollution something we mommy-doms, and similar oppressed powers embody in the aforementioned flesh market as controlled by whores reclaiming their own bodies. Fight Amazons with Amazons mid Amazonamachia as dualistic, turn revolution into kayfabe. Medusa is always a victim in the state's eyes, so turn that on its head, e.g. Amazons and anal rape. Make Medusa's voiceless screams and raw naked fury your weapon, i.e. to wage intersectionally solidarized class, culture, and race war in ways not dissimilar to my friends and I. Look to the past, and you will find all the answers you need. R.E. James Baldwin. The models featured here are but a small handful of the larger whole who agreed to be a part of sex positivity. The entirety, about 90 at this point, can be found in the acknowledgements section to sex positivity. Also read their interviews and hailing hellions. Lastly, the citations throughout this finale should give you some different places, to dig into, searching for answers only whores can impart. Whatever the form, learn from our stories, including the ones told by my friends and I to have our revenge against the pimp. Beyond these books, though, tell your own stories in art, writing, and public nudism, among other forms of art above, i.e. to rewrite history on your aegis as shared with so many others. In short, capitalism is a bad lie, his realism, and faulty legacy of endless death and destruction we break on the aegis reclaimed. War is a racket, class, culture, and race war is not. Instead, it pricks up steam by reclaiming value as something to sing about, or perform however an iconoclast wants to, e.g. Bill Watterson camping the Protestant ethic with his own Calvin and Hobbes above. Revolution began with a whisper, saying Tracy Chapman. Now scream, be heard as much as seen, i.e., like my friends and I have here, vis-a-vis Anita Sarkeesian, enjoy the garbage of the past, but endorse universal liberation through intersectional solidarity's pedagogy of the oppressed, i.e. the subversion of canonical norms during the dialectic of the alien to hug Medusa, i.e. by putting rape in quotes during Little Gothic BDSM, often the visual threat of violent torture, or at least the marriage of sex to power and death as a perceived invasion from the awesomely torturous ritualistic past, e.g. bring me the earth, and join every dimension, or ass is where I belong to, I won't give you the ass. And as you sing loud and proud, the state will frame us as Radcliffean shadows to banish, like all whores, e.g. as evil goblins, wicked necromancers, and or numinous Gorgon rulers from beyond the stars, or a capitalist realism pimping the ghost of the counterfeit to further objection. You must not stop. Tokenism is poor stewardship, so turn away from Judas Pay. Be stewards to nature, including yourselves, animals and the earth. R.E. the pale blue dot, vis-a-vis Carl Sagan. Become the voice of the dead whore that outs the state as pimp eternal. Their lies are too good to be true, so tempt them with homewreckers' testimony that's too stubborn to die, a nightmare that never ends. We have no beginning and no end. Your legacy is dead. Such visions are poetically described as original sin, being both what Plato once called opinion, the wilderness between knowledge and ignorance, the unknown, but also the classic grantor of wishes, their fulfillment in guilty pleasure tied to blind paralysis feeding on trauma, r.e. strange appetites conditioned by capital. As capital is patriarchal, there is an ancient sexist element. Megan McAuliffe O'Leary describes it well. Eat the fucking apple, they're going to blame you regardless. You might as well go to the gallows with a full belly, knowing more than God. I would add, be the apple is something numinous to eat. R.E. capital sexualizes everything, to rape everything, i.e. in ways we dark mommies must subvert through sustenance and protection. R.E. Laura Ng's the most powerful weapon you have, vis-a-vis Edward Said's culture and imperialism, with my own rape reprise speaking to Amazons being classic victims and terror weapons pimped by the state in undead, demonic, and or animalistic drug-like ways. But also through multi-mediums too, e.g. flesh, but also clay as a likeness of flesh, and similar simulacra as ink, paint, metal, or bone. Don't be afraid to play with rape through monsters, which whores are, Amazons or not, de facto educators to turn into during sex with the lights on, staring the state speechless, that was a pun, Medusa, the queen of staring contests. Teach through testimony is partially poetic, speaking to secrets that survive as boner-inducing and pun-heavy simulacra, boners again alluding to graveyard sex, the boneyard filled with dead whores and their servants and enemies alike. R.E. Quote, the Western world is generally a place that testifies to its own traumas by fabricating them, i.e. as markers of sovereignty that remain historically unkind to specific groups, that nevertheless survive within them as ghosts of unspeakable events linked to systemic abuse. Trauma in turn survives through stories corrupted by the presence of said abuse. There is a home resembling a castle, where a ghost, often of a woman, lurks inside, having been met with a sorry fate. But undeath is something that can be felt through echoes of ourselves that aren't diegetically spectral. They feel spectral to an uncanny resemblance, like standing over our own graves. This becomes something to play with during Ludogothic BDSM, akin to an, at times, humorous, even trashy gallows theater rife with dark forbidden language, sin, vice, violent sex, all-around death, and other taboo subjects discouraged by privileged and unimaginative moderates who historically frame the Gothic as a puerile, good-for-nothing backwater, while simultaneously suffering from conservative delusions of privilege and or tokenism. In other words, the pedagogy of the oppressed faces its classic foil, tone policing. Unquote. Damn the critics and pick up the pace. Revolutionary cryptonomy is sentiment relayed through code, history, and ever-changing document of Gothic fakeries, Walpole onwards, i.e. the only time such persons are happy is when they're in control, and harming others with said control, so we must take it away from them, through our voice as the antidote to silence, thus rape and genocide. R.E. capital alienates and sexualizes everything, insofar as nature is pimped out by capitalist dark alien horror, an iconoclastic performance whose not of this earth showcase becomes something to fear and thus control. This makes controlling it, R.E. us, the monstrous feminine, the state's historical material imperative, i.e. they love, hate, and fear what they try to control as being fundamentally out of their control. Much of that equation lies in fantasies of revenge to enact, the place for its execution simultaneously of no entry or exit mid-divorce. The usual frontiers come home to roost, the black veil parting to reveal an Ozymandian ruin behind, where the usual Scooby-Doo piracies are denied, instead occurring in reverse. So activism is reclaimed, feminism or otherwise reclaimed by horrors as monstrous feminine, meaning anything not a white straight European Christian man, albeit to modular degrees of privilege and oppression, but also arbitrary persecution language and enforcement, i.e. whose system of reward, crime, and punishment lead one and all to a holistically menticidal discipline, or a profit-pimping nature as horror. Behind every shadowy bugbear is an impostor to demask, a secret sinner on par with Radcliffe's titular Italian, Father Shadoni, echoing Lewis's cross-dressing horror, the devil in disguise, but also the ghost giving testimony to its own rape and murder, or vice versa. Again, Radcliffe's refrain classically polices nature, the outgroup, through cartoonishly evil in-group scapegoats, i.e. banditti, pimps, and horror, pirates, in duality, regardless of sexual biology and orientation, race, religion, or gender identity performance. Medusa is a big horror, colossal butt pirate, taking the booty back with the booty to make it valuable again, versus classically cheap, as the state does. Except there's no monopoly on cryptonomy through violence, terror, and monsters, i.e., as we've acclimated to such duality. Nevertheless, their function results from what is done with power as performance, our bad faith leper enemies unable to penetrate us to get what they want, but simultaneously lured to their doom by us. As siren songs intoxicating unknown, one whose entropic graveyard thrives on disorder, to anisotropically break capitalist realism and its vast generational system of nostalgic lies and theft, which the black veil is, is tied to the horror's native state of existence exploited historically through ethnocentric ideas of destiny, classically through geography. Also, biology is linked to sex and gender not being separate. For example, I am a woman regardless of my biology. Indeed, I labor, in spite of it, in capital's powerful turf advocates calling people like me home invaders, i.e. capital constantly colonizing itself to keep power with the elite, less profit, and genocide. Hi. Beyond me, whores come from many different stripes. Regardless they are fruit to consume, the harvest cornucopia is something that can humanize itself to expose the usual pirates of our labor's fruits. The elite, pirates of Silicon Valley, and their servants, the middle class, emulating them, essentially Nazi Dilbert and technocratic fascism, from Peter Thiel to Bill Gates to Mr. Beast and similar billionaires, venture capitalists, RE as inhumane, privileged by the usual diehard ethnocentric models, and their racism, sexism, and other bigotries being self-defeating enterprises. Embarrass the state by humanizing your whorish elements, fight back with whatever's on hand, the guerrilla historically relying on invention below, and when you do, make it a riot, riots famously involving the throwing of food, also below. So do we whores come from dark, numinous, otherworldly states of relegation, I liken to a harvest, e.g. the female genitals or anus, female or not. Such orchards of despair yield bounties of food we lob at our enemies, i.e. the very things they love and hate, but also fear and worship as sacred, profane, virgin, whore. Something to rub their face in, we beings of the street, the jungle, the ghetto, but ultimately the ruined, angry land, deliberately use the aegis, our goods, to reverse the flow of abuse, i.e. by demasking state powers to break said realism to bits, burying our thirsty enemies alive. So do we pelt them with the very fruit they normally carve from us, weaponizing what is normally stolen from ourselves, our land, labor, and bodies, to rob our foe of their structured appetite, attack from the produce aisle, the ghost of the banana republic embarrassing the colonizer above. Exit only, bitch. Now the shoe's on the other foot. I say structure because the Gothic is writ in disintegration, i.e. as a structure unto itself, and on to explore mid-peril as a suitable Gothic feeling, the rotting castle, colony, or homestead, etc. Though classically fake, this is where power, true power, is found when whores reclaim such things, i.e. by reversing the state's hold on us, and what they fetishize of us made objection. I clutch thee, but have thee not. Indeed, hell is our home, one we're used to exploring in ways the state has literally divided itself from, i.e. by endlessly fetishizing and exploiting workers and nature as alien during proxy war, e.g. Lavos from Chrono Trigger. The closer you are to the central status quo, the less exploited alien you feel. The capital arbitrate abuse against those with more privilege too, e.g. Mick Gordon. No one is safe from the pimp, and if you don't believe me, ask all the lonely men out there. Capital has taught them badly on purpose, cuckolding their little pimps in training in the hopes that they'll snap and punch down. All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. For we horrors, though, these fantasies aren't an escape, but a sexy alien's guerrilla weapon of endless power against the state and its husbandry of cowards. Cops are bred to fear nature through state menticide, but also promise of jungle brides, i.e. versus the oppressor controlling sex's alien through force, e.g. the xenomorph or sailor scouts. In Gothic, tyrants fear the return of the past, liberating the whore, so it tokenizes whores and their allies. Tokenism is fascism. Decaying capital towards itself is something to revive mid-abjection. We whores reverse the process, resurrecting ourselves to foil state rebirth. Bread and circus is their recipe, and breeds endless betrayals, re. Karl Jobst, i.e. through alien language, piloted, Radcliffe-style by cops, token or not, which our mendacious cakes reclaim. One labor exchange to the next. Hairy animal whores, women or otherwise below, hold all the secrets, i.e. those the capital seeks to steal not once, but time and time again. Whores, once awake, are billboards for communism. So does sex mark the spot, one last pun, i.e. during the cryptonomy process, showing through concealment instead of cancelled. The future comes alive, through undead nostalgia rising from the grave, out of hell, the jungle, etc. Like the creature from Frankenstein, we anisotropically reverse counter-terror through universal liberation, achieved via intersectional sex worker solidarity and similarity amid difference, i.e. to raise emotional Gothic intelligence in class, culture, and race awareness, thus challenge abolish profit and all things tied to it, that cause widespread harm, to say to our so-called makers during the Promethean quest, "You are not gods." Again, the state is straight, and ASAV, ACAV, AFAB, APAB, ACAB, states, cops, billionaires, participants, kings, etc. Medusa's return embodies a testimony that shatters patriarchal legacy by reminding the world the king is a pimp, and a mortal venal one. Who better than a whore to castrate them, someone comfortable with themselves and being made of evil flesh and bone, but also with being penetrated. So come to mommy, motherfuckers. You're just as expendable as us, and infinitely more guilty of abusing everything around you. Whores being the classic scapegoat victim of capital, which the Gorgon turns on the consumer of stolen plunder from Medusa's numinous vaults. We are not pigs for your abattoir. Ancient abuse, ancient revenge, and nothing more satisfying than the flesh. That most ancient of merchandise, turning the tables on its prescribed purveyors mid-market. The butchered become the butcher, and vice versa. The so-called pieces of meat fucking back while consumed. Everyone loves the whore, and no revenge is sweeter than ours. Of the cop feigns immunity towards educational sin, the whore adapts to experimental vice. She is the fruit to eat, and understands that, while no one is immune, she has home court advantage. Whore equals homewrecker, versus the nuclear model to secretly, or not so secretly, despise. From Sappho to Mother Brain, her cream pie cauldron is the birthplace of dissent. Its stank juices ambrosia for the mind set free. Through illusion reclaimed, the Gorgon doubling Plato's cave with her own sticky vault, e.g. the Matrix and vampire capitalism. Dark, wet, tight, and writhing wickedly tied to antiquity as thoroughly ontological. Wherever you go, she'll be waiting for you. The fact remains, you can't camp canning without killing your darlings, so take this series title extension, Liberating Sex Workers to Iconoclastic Art, to heart, and its logical conclusion. Facing death can change the fiercest of attackers and their warped perspectives, to give new appreciation during calculated risk, relieving stress, mid-representation, as a state of intersectional solidarity among whores versus racial, cultural, and class division, no almost children, but also exposure to our enemies who try and count themselves among our number. We whores can invent whatever we need to survive, i.e. inside the labyrinth is our home, to reclaim, our peach to feast on, or with, vampirically reversing the flow that food travels, a charnel house, carrion flower, or poisoned apple, etc. We burrow through common horrors to delight in your disgust. Whatever panic spasm wrecks your soul, we take your power by virtue of you having given yourselves and your bad faith away when viewing us. Poison not just a woman's weapon, but paradox a place to turn it to our monstrous feminine's preferred holistic advantage, female or not, regardless of skin, gender, color, or religion, etc. Unchain the night, or revolutionary cryptonomy sucking from you that which you call poison, save when you're stealing it from us. Steal this. To it, a whore's ultimate revenge is speech, and our cacophony of whores steal state power by virtue of testimony to state falsehood, i.e. the state is the imposter versus the whore, the latter's unmasking of the former, reminding workers during calculated risk that mutual consent is sexy, versus police violence, hence lack of consent, worshipped canonically as heroism against nature. The fact remains capital is haunted by rape, hyphenating sex and war as things to camp. Exploitation and liberation share the same half-real, gothically nostalgic, retro-future spaces, ones whose interrogation of power by whores being to go where power is and navigate it, mise en abîme, through play. Revolution likewise keeps it together by shared love, a kind of felt among strangers, i.e. the whore skilled in the perceived and performative confusions of friend and foe, pleasure and pain, master and apprentice, or predator and prey. So do they suitably keep a cool head, one able to separate impostors during the cryptonomy process, putting rape, thus exposure for the Gothic heroine surrounded by danger, in quotes. Our nudity and agency over said nudity and trauma attracting equally traumatized people, enraging infantile, who angrily see what they can't control as something to attack, e.g. Gen X Gamer attacking the sex workers who model for me, saying they both aren't oppressed because they're sex workers, and also that I'm oppressing them like Andrew Tate oppresses his victims. Cops are the biggest imposters, infiltrating the brothel, the church, the danger disco. The louder we scream, the more they squirm in their shitty disguises. Screaming from hell or finding your power and on to better things, in a planetary brothel run by whores. Again, if whores liked power unto themselves, the state wouldn't try to police us on and off stage, i.e. through the strange appetites that capital conduces and affords, To it, the state's biggest fear is Medusa set free, which it polices everywhere it can, or out of revenge, through persecution mania, attack the alien and extermination, rhetoric it abuses to feed itself, made gaslight, the fear of the Gorgon unleashed, spilling its guts to expose state secrets made war cry, as unto itself, orgasmic, rapturous, alien, free, the flying fortress whose promise of a black planet of whores amounts to the proverbial fat lady singing when it's finally over. Yet time remains a circle, one where the monstrous feminine screams the unspeakable as loudly and as rapturously, therefore orgasmically as possible, i.e. the very earth, that whore to harvest like fat sassy fruit, curling its toes to humanize the harvest by testifying to generational trauma. Reversing objection, Medusa walks the tightrope between victimizer and victim, requiring her human counterparts, we whores, to be paradoxically unfettered and gingerly in our personal uproars, i.e. lest we gentrify and decay through capital's cops and victims' tokenization of whores, re. subjugated Amazons. Assimilation is poor stewardship, knowing our own worth as whores with infinite value, meaning not selling out to the usual pimps promising us protection. Medusa is the master of memento mori, but also a hego, and many whores are gorehounds, e.g. I am a horror movie fan. From the classic Western variant, which includes more recent versions like Pyramid Head or the Xenomorph, to non-Western doppelgangers, re. Sadako Yamamura, Medusa is always a monstrous avenger of past wrongs occurring in the present space and time, i.e. something to hark and heed mid-rapture, the horror replete with psychosexual paradox, a fury to feel through her body, unheimlich, as communism and its specters camping everything in sight, which include Marx, who was always a bit dry and dull. Yes, you can experience pleasure and pain in their presence, to give and receive such things the whore's body built to withstand punishment. But more than that, you can look upon them for sexual and asexual reasons, thereby witness whatever escapes the whore's hellish container when poked. Harder! Faster! Beat that fat pussy up! Clap those cheeks! Give me your power! Medusa skirts the line between vulnerable and invulnerable, armor and exposure, e.g. too small panties, or a gothic heroine's nightgown, or warding off fears of dark courtly love, e.g. the horse-tight pussy, and frog-like amplexus, able to navigate such perils to enrich themselves, voyeur and exhibit, effectively using all hell's power trapped between one's legs to turn the planet, therefore the proverbial frogs that call said planet home, gay as hell. This goes both ways, of course. To it, rape is a structure, the Gothic Kessel is dogma. re. For the state to antagonize nature as whore, and put it cheaply to work in monomythic forms, itself an aphrodisiac, for anyone inside the man-box, token or not. For us, rape combines with creativity as ostensible wizardry to the uninitiated. Power is performance perceived for different aims, during the usual forgery's liminal expression. So use your own naked mirrors, dark forces, and paradox to showcase whoever attacks your buffers, and remind those who do, often in bad faith, that certain things are true no matter how hard they deny or deep they bury them, i.e. Medusa is always waiting to freeze them in their tracks, hence profit. We must play with such things, for playing is not only how we learn, but learn to change the world around us through itself, by establishing control while feeling out of control, i.e. as pretty soldiers making the world more communist, ergo a better place. In Gothic, the nuclear home is always false, scapegoating its own rapacious crimes, those of the drunk husband, jealous boyfriend, pedophile coach, or false preacher, and their respective defenders, onto the usual hellcats, outsiders, whores et al. Cops talk tough, but fear whores, showing the state their belly by punching down at said whores in hell. The way a husband beats his wife, but also how a child breaks their toys. Capital infantilizes in the worst ways, leading to policing sex with force because doing so is profitable and has been since the beginning. Profit isn't just literally built on rape, it is rape. I've said repeatedly during this finale and elsewhere how sex work is the oldest profession, thus the oldest labor exploitation, i.e. where workers can have our revenge by screaming their existence as pleasurably as possible above to terrify our would-be captors pimping us. Pandora's box could not be closed once open, so open wide and testify in spite of the usual witness tampering and intimidation, the whore being the classic witness to tone police. Such things are fundamental to state operations, e.g. the Spartan secret police, the Cryptea, pimping its own victims, the enslaved population, i.e. the Death Squad commando not unique to Achilles, Beowulf, or Rambo, but all these killers being forced to empty their humanity versus nature as whore, something to summon against us, and whose mirror syndrome we must anticipate and exploit, re manbox, prison sex, and weird canonical nerds, and their various death cults, state, corporate, or not, versus weird iconoclastic nerds. They menace us, we menace back, the bait and the trap. So shame the incel with their own failure of the mirror test. Complete inability to form healthy social sexual bonds with other humans, make the spineless, heartless, brainless rapist and their home of rape fear their own replacement deconstruction when the oppressed come home to roost. On the aegis, the whore's pussy a perverse palace of forbidden pleasure, their ass a genie's lamp that when rubbed releases dark wishes tied to abject objects of power. So is the Gorgon's Cave advertised repeatedly as something to invade, shelter to steal from some indigenous force the state, already classically white, male, straight, and friendly Christian out of a pagan past known for public torture, the Romans, bastardized into Catholic and Protestant dogma, goes on to deem unholy, hence worthy of sacrifice, decimation and crucifixion brought to levels of slaughter the Caesars couldn't dream of achieving, e.g. the Palestinians. All serve the same superior-inferior argument pushing for legitimacy versus illegitimacy as legal and illegal on and off stage, except it's been thoroughly radicalized through the usual state tools, i.e. as the state decays into older ontological versions of itself, with the elite always shielded by the gobstopper core's outer layers. To it the state preys on nature by design, which it shows conceals through cryptonomy during the abjection process leading to state shift, re climate change, as described by Patel and Moore. But Medusa comes for us all, token or not. Life and death are never truly separate, but two sides of the same decay and rebirth scheme. So become Medusa in small, punching up a capital in small, i.e. its traders aping our own rebellious language, the Amazon when tokenized being a false rebellion whose subjugation must constantly be subverted by genuine activists. Diversity is strength when it cannot be divided. Inclusive nudity, the whore's armor during the liminal ontology of war's oppositional cryptonomy. It paradoxically enacts anti-predation that happens behind invisible buffers, e.g. phone screens, but also because anyone attacking the whore's shadow outs themselves as pimp, e.g. swerfs. In doing so, monsters, which whores are, demonstrate poetic arguments arbitrary to ancient theater. This amounts to anything the state denigrates while pimping such territories, or a preferential code with ontological flavors, e.g. family and home, likewise being anything the state leverages habitually against us homewrecker whores. The secret sins of empire. They view the street us like trolley problems to solve, stigma animal vermin to destroy linked to the usual sites of plunder and death, e.g. the cryptonomy of female bodies and original sin speaking just as easily to trans ontologies, with its whole formally being a regular mind to depict in that respect below. R.A. Shelley and Frankenstein preceded Marx by virtue of women, queer folk, largely being closer to oppression and exploitation than straight men. To exist at all, despite state harm, is our revenge, doubly so if we hammer home whatever point we need to, using what we got to do the job, the GNC power-bottom showboat with the jackhammer ass, beating the cop at their own game. Sex is a drug and we're the ones dealing it, the devil to deal with, petrifying our executioners. When they weaponize the moon against us, we horse turn around and blast its numinous power back onto them. R.E. escaping Jadis. Stare and tremble, bitches. Fuck the alien, trading your soul, whatever that is, for a hell of a time. Family for the whore isn't blood, but what we make for ourselves. Despite those just asking questions to defend state ideas of home selling our own rapes back to us, e.g. the Jewish question, the Palestinian question, the trans question, or similar dubious queries, i.e. the state brothel, a death lottery upholding perceived moral orders, where more privileged workers can afford to temporarily look the other way, turn a blind eye towards Medusa. Such solutions in the orderly disposal are never final, have made to rinse and repeat. Those who defend such repetition can't face that terrible reality until they can, when suddenly it's the easiest choice in all the world, us versus them, the Roman fool downing the executioner's hood when in Rome, selling bread and circus toys during genocide is the main attraction, punching enemies at the gate, e.g. Doom the Dark Ages, see my review of the game. Fuck it, free Palestine. We horse turn that back at them, using our agencies to do the trick, so to speak, below. They never owned us. All the same, they can certainly try. So does the Gothic transplant. Older language as past, i.e. to discuss and dissect the present enchanting the oppressed, or vice versa. Imperfect reminders that lead paradoxically away from harm by putting it in quotes. The whore makes trophies of men as such, a demon who abjures the Protestant ethic, literally not safe for work. They're a black rabbit to follow into hell. So is their cryptonomy an Ouroboros, one who's befuddling and alluring morphological statements. While we won't have time to unpack them here, routinely hyphenate body and home reset on Bime, as the Gothic do, i.e. or something to get lost inside, re. a castle, necropolis, Dante-esque forest, and lonely cabin, Metroidvania, or similar chronotype to exude the infernal concentric pattern, as dark brothel holding the whore and their bastard's revenge inside, a lady death lying in wait, or a classically female but also monstrous feminine spaces and occupants penetrated by standard token officers of the law, framed as intrepid explorers to conduct settler colonialism again, e.g. Samus pimping Mother Brain's own city-sized womb, a hysterectomy performed inside the belly of the beast. Small wonder the castration fantasy and its ontological confusions, the phallic woman and archaic mother, are some of the most common and old Gothic wishes being presented, say nothing of size difference, and the Gothic's trademark feelings of tremendous obscurity, power, and decay. Regardless of my intent, most of my enemies, despite surface-level mockery, avoid my work like the plague, too hot to handle, i.e. because they 1. Can't profit off investigating it, and 2. Because there's so much of it, they'd rather make YouTube slop or lie about genocide overseas. By comparison, there's nothing for us whores to hide, and everything for them to expose by fucking with us. Pimps ransom their victims, be whores of gorillas who bait our enemies inside the usual brothels, then get 'em good to reclaim such poetic territory's recursive value, i.e. through Gothic fakery, a nesotropic replacement, reclaiming the planet for ourselves by representing its abused elements. We workers aren't merely rewards to harvest virgin whore, land back, labor back, sex back, stories back. We choosers of the slain, which whores are, decide who can play with us and who cannot, then rub it in, i.e. like GLaDOS. Anyways, this cake tastes great. It's so delicious and moist. It's okay to lie if it helps us survive, i.e. by challenging state operations without harming others, yet reliably raising emotions, blood pressure, stakes, erections, etc. The cake is a lie, and a beautiful one. Learn to bake that your bakeries might liberate you and all the world. You are not expendable, so dispense with any ceremonies that unironically say you are. Again, context matters. Sex work is work, always, and something the whore classically does to survive, i.e. by speaking out mid-cryptonomy. Charm is a whore's weapon, a means of taking control through sex duping the pimp versus them duping us. And just as it helps workers survive, it also speaks empirically to those who did not entirely survive, those who learned the hard way in the past, paying the usual price that capital demands of its victims. Everything. So do whores freeze our prey in response, warming what capital has chilled. R.A. Marx, quote, capital is dead labor which vampire life lives only by sucking living labor, unquote. We reverse that to free all workers, but cops addicted to harming us will, without the usual peaches to squeeze into pulp, undoubtedly suffer. Serves them right. No one ever died from blue balls. Suck it, dickwads. To it, trauma lives in the body, and a victim is always to some degree undead, i.e. as a matter of trauma also being demonic/animal, i.e. a paradoxical means of revenge through dark desires. Medusa's avatars, like the goddess herself, have cute and furious sides, i.e. their castles in the flesh are stacked, speaking through abstract Amazon exposure. For every secret cop lying in wait, a secret rebel does the same, ready to kick ass with ass. I'm the Gorgon in small, fighting fire with fleshy fire, darkness visible, tits and ass, a hairy vice-like pussy's lips that grip. So do we, class, culture, and race warriors, purge the pimp, waging war on graveyards of past battles that never were, evoking the ghost of the counterfeit to reverse abjection, dancing with her majesty to hug and fuck the alien. Purity of virtue isn't what we care about, but rather not being pimped by the same old dead world's hidden masters. The owner class, concealed through neoliberal retro-future monomyth fantasies, often video games, RA shooters, and Metroidvania, high fantasies, framed as false power sold to assuage the anxious. Not to hug the alien alone, but fuck them, trade with them, to help free the world from capitalist realism once and for all. They'll demand your submission. Say, make me, while making them your captive audience, the Gothic prone to speaking of capture by playfully reenacting it. Imagine a world divorced from state aims, and state abuses manufacturing conflict, scarcity, and consent, where we all could just exist, naked as jaybirds, and fuck who we want even if that means no one at all. Through free capitalist ideas and language, re the Gorgon, we horsepush vengefully against profit towards a post-scarcity world, an end to crisis, energy, or otherwise, ergo an end to pimps, cops, and unironic xenophobia, so we become the empress of our fates, but capital conditions we, slaves, can reject, nor is it strictly a bad thing if we can control our flaws, e.g. to lie, cheat, and steal for our friends, i.e. rebels seek to avoid abandonment, sticking by each other in times of crisis forced upon us. One Gorgon's a sitting duck, but 3? Perseus would have been toast. The lesson, as Medusa shows, but also her avatars, e.g. me in these books' Army of Horrors, is that no one is perfect, especially a death goddess marked by rape, but trauma lives in and around the body as something to instruct, all the same. So look upon the Gorgon's ghostly gorgeous backside, or her equally portentous front side, i.e. to speak through the usual code, as, often enough, naked as babes, but shrouded as sheets in awesome mystery. The numinous for us is palliative, but also full of the same old tropes repackaged for a new generation of adventure seekers forming Medusa-like Voltron, a composite body too big to see all sides of it. So does Cryptonomy hide and reveal. The black veil, something you may not have realized. A pirate flag, with black knights not just being mercenary bastards, which whores essentially are, on the male side of things, traveling from place to place through medieval protection rackets, but as land-based pirates. As blood-drinking Easterners associated with the Ottomans, even as enemies, as Vlad the Impaler was. The Gothic, as I've repeatedly said, loves pirates, i.e. from the land to the sea, from Shakespeare's Hamlet to Radcliffe's Udolpho to Conan, The Princess Bride, either version, The Pirates of Darkwater, and Cuphead. Pirates are classically fake, so are whores, whose spirited adventure and forgery is where freedom lies, i.e. while recultivating the superstructure to reclaim the base is partly performative, hence phenomenological. Rebellion is half real, full of myths and legends matelotage. Wicked servants, false friends, giants and titans, shadows and whispers, and yes, whores, all beckoning with bedroom eyes that you come for them, and in more ways than one. A scene closed off, the way the capital closes everything off. The Gothic convention summons them again through nuptial parodies. Re, all the cuties in this book, a kind of swashbucklers' pantheon, their own collective pull attracting us, i.e. through an uneven desire for connection, similarity amid difference. Sometimes they come and go, like wind or dreams, nightmares or love. But to have had it once, or more than once, is better than never. Gothic communism teaches through love is forbidden, hence do whores as pirates. E.g. Harmony, corrupted as someone I've worked with plenty throughout this series, but wasn't available for its conclusion. The show must go on, and I'll always consider them my friend, even if I don't see them again. If that ship has truly sailed, it is what it is, and there's always another quest, less numinous whore to quest for. A plank to walk, booty to plunder, and ages to show and revel in, the site where power, true power, calls home. Such is calculated risk, which feels good regardless if its cultivation, commodification, and intoxicating digestion post-consumption makes total sense. The devil is in the details, amounting to little Gothic BDSM, a revenge pioneered by me, but also friends like Harmony Corrupted finding value in our bodies as art, re what the state treats like cheap throwaway adventure yarns, the Gothic since day one, but which we horrors turn into poetic weaponry, whose prime real estate, and ecstasy outside of the raw chemical elements, is misbehaving in cultural ways, re acid communism. Yar, amazing chest ahead, but also booty. It's a mimic crushing your puny skull or junk between its ass crack like walnuts. You're the patient and she's the surgeon, hatching scheme after scheme while eating your brains. Nom nom. The best sex is silly sex, making room for jokes and playtime, hence laughter and love. Same idea with rebellion. Are you ready, kids? Aye, aye, Captain. Hypnotoad ain't got nothing on me, but also my opinionated band of ragtag assholes and their various instruments, ass or otherwise. Genocide sucks, as does collective punishment, reactive abuse, and revenge arguments against whole populations, ethnic or otherwise, e.g. rebellion or gender, and banning media, including the people in said media, commonly sex workers, is a form of genocide. This shouldn't be controversial to announce, but it is because the state rapes nature as monstrous feminine by design, be that death by firing squad, life sentence for petty offenses, lynching, or gang rape. Genocide is genocide. i.e. different degrees and flavors of shit the state doles out historically materially in pursuit of profit is something it can never satisfy, because the chase is the point. All our yesterday's language under the banality of evil, Tolkien was a wrinkled old pimp. Luckily, the state and its mendacious corporate hegemon don't have monopolies on such matters, i.e., white straight men monopolizing computers before and after the rise of video games. To it, Gothic communism encourages relating to workers different than we are, i.e., through unequal privilege and oppression, pursuing universal liberation through holistic pedagogies of the oppressed, i.e., similarity amid difference. A.G., Harmony, and I are poly, but only have a working relationship despite playing together in past, whatever the form, and even with toxic elements. Relationships, including working ones, give we whores a rare chance to reflect on ourselves, i.e., under duress, under constant states of change, mixing and matching versus restricting our tool sets and alienating ourselves to fear and dogma, the classic fear of the imaginary past that Neo-Gothic deals in, riding the lightning as much as rockets or witches' brooms, thus tanking all the state has to throw at us, with our fat, tank-like asses, the terrifying potential our dungeon-like pussies, assholes, or mouths, meson, and bime. As usual, we're bare and exposed as the Amazon is, but armed and armored for bear to escape the brothel of war and freeze the prudish protector as nothing more than pimp acting in bad faith, our secret weapons lying and hiding in plain sight, the girding loins courtly love. We whores even like it, can even like it, provided we're in control, making harm impossible with our playmates, thereby counteracting state prescriptions that routinely harm us on purpose. Again, there's always another castle and furious man-eater inside. Not that I'm a man or Harmony someone who actually harmed me. We're both monstrous feminine, each of us having a variety of appetites and careers to consider while passing in the night, nerd sacks coming and going like ladies of the night, in the night, as ghost ships. Go read their interview if you want to know more about them, and support their work too. Goddesses demand tribute, after all, and Harmony is peerless in that respect. But much like theory and practice, self-control and temptation walk a fine line, one you'll have to cross to meet people like Harmony yourself. Victim Avenger and Predation Payment also walk a fine line. The femme fatale Mamidam, a relic of antiquity, the capital pimped post-medieval world, to blame the usual victims. Pirates ourselves, Harmony and I played with such things to yield a variety of performative takeaways, i.e. that let us camp the cannon inside capital, spilling our guts, masks, costumes, alter egos, puppets, sex dolls, or acting like sex dolls above. Below, sex toys, dildos or otherwise, also below, and various highs and lows, the stuff of dreams and nightmares, Medusas of power bottom, and accustomed to power imbalance as indigenous to Gothic romance, haunted by Rome's diehard ghost, specter of rape projected onto artifacts of all the usual bugbear power fantasies, e.g. Big Black Dick, also below, linked to orcs and goblins per anti-Semitic myth. The perpetual thrill of near-death, vasovagal, healing through rape, while transporting the audience to edge on the devil's playground. Wild sex is good sex, and sounds a little like bloody murder. First one's free, but tip your sex workers, feast or famine. Always, always, always. The mind is its own place, and we, or our wayward lovers and teachers above, hold all the keys. Our tight, fleshy rings, given as gifts, use their paradoxical, pandemonic lessons, or a proximity to power and destruction to build a better world than capital's endless nightmare, one without cops, kings, pimps, pedophiles, or billionaires. The barren level sands stretch far away. We're all kings and queens under communism, loves. Less jesters working for the monarch, a pimp, and more us working for ourselves, juggling preferential code and dancing with chainsaws or otherwise below to accomplish our prurient goals, i.e. reclaiming the language of nightmares, turning them lucid, dream warriors, made arbitration, something to stare at and puzzle about, ruminating on whatever meaning such controlled chaos affords. Somewhere in there is a victim, with Leatherface famously alluding to Ed Gein, but also his female victims and abusers. But the work to reverse abjection remains teamwork, as this ceremony hopefully shows, i.e. Lilith's birthing of little monsters that lead one and all towards universal liberation, is building a better hell on Earth than any prison the elite state proponents call paradise. Cut off Medusa's head, and she grows more powerful than the state can imagine, re. Quote, when Perseus slew the Medusa, he did not, as commonly thought, put an end to her reign or destroy her terrifying powers. Afterwards, Athena embossed her shield with the Medusa's head, the writhing snakes, their fanged gaping mouths, and the Medusa's own enormous teeth and lolling tongue were on full view. Athena's aim was simply to strike terror into the hearts of men, as well as reminding them of their symbolic debt to the imaginary castrating mother, and no doubt she knew what she was doing. After all, Athena was the great mother goddess of the ancient world, and according to ancient legend, the daughter of Metis, the goddess of wisdom, also known as the Medusa. Unquote. Source: Barbara Creed's The Monstrous Feminine. So does any decapitation survive the body it leaves behind, a symbol of something that remains to speak about murder of whores and all workers everlasting. Gothic communism offers speech as community defense, i.e. to defend the marginalized, which whores are, by giving them a voice to scream whorishly with, castrating state aims and structure to rein in blood, drinking the pussy Kool-Aid to capitalize on Kristeva's powers of horror and Creed's monstrous feminine, with both women snaking into Gothic communism as I and my friends devised it. Sex workers are some of the most oppressed voices that exist. As such, they testify in ways that, less like a whisper, must scream at the top of their lungs to be heard, i.e., as wholly exhilarating ways during ritualized doom and exquisite torture. Their mere existence criminal to seditious extremes, but also liberation through flagellation and monstrous language, normally scanned by state fakes, e.g., like Milton's Satan or staking vampires, but also Radcliffe's heroines being size queens coming back for seconds, adds madness, peril, and riddles to perform mid-BDSM, as the Gothic do. Why does Medusa and her ilk like to be ravished, and how does this Hellcat's hysterical testimony help her survive? Quote, I could a tale unfold whose lightest word would harrow up thy soul, freeze thy young blood, make thy two eyes like stars start from their spheres, thy knotted and combined locks to part, and each particular hair to stand on end, like quills upon the fretful porcupine. Unquote. The mixture of metaphors speaks to attention through sex, the stalk of a one-eyed monster led by the guiding hand and piercing gaze towards the wandering womb's gaping maw. Riding is the voice of the unheard, red rum in the flesh, a live wire ready to explode. Questions lead to more questions, e.g., why is Medusa furious? And why does she demand tribute from us to lick her feet, smell her ass, stare at her bloody stump above? The sad reality is, knowledge and activism gentrify and decay like anything else, so consult Diogenes, not Aristotle, the regression of Plato and Socrates, consult in the wretched, which includes whores and sex. Medusa's blind fury is perceptive in its pastiche only when inclusive dialogues push for universal liberation. To its sex and its asexual interrogation isn't all bad in our hands. In the state's hands, we whores are damned if you do, damned if you don't. So, the Gothic finds salvation through damnation, i.e. as something almost holy to cant, reclaim, and control, said Black Mass breaking the monopolies previously mentioned. As an aesthetic of power and death we've acclimated towards under Pygmalion's raid, which includes Stephen King's above. To know where the bodies are buried, the call coming always from inside the house, symbolic of the nuclear model's disastrous imperial core. Uri, the Gothic villain from Radcliffe onwards, is always a fraudulent insider or token scapegoat, e.g. Carrie, above. Our theatrical suffering sits adjacent to actual harm, converging upon our abusers hiding behind our memento mori. Uri, sexual martyrdom. Our echoed cries rising up from Persephone's hellish dream world. Payback's a bitch, giving looks that kill. Here we go again, or a devilish encore. Medusa's siren song putting pussy on the chain wax. Medusa is the perfect organism, a survivor ready to evolve while fetishizing war. For communist aims, Uri, there is always another castle, one existing out in the open, and operating through public nudism on a social sexual ace to non-ace gradient. So can whores like us chronicle, invigilate, and archive ourselves, i.e. pursuant to fresh, healthier destinies with Ludo-Gothic BDSM, to raise emotional, Gothic, intelligence, and awareness, while questing like Prometheus for the numinous until Medusa, the proverbial fat lady, Phantom of the Opera, takes all of us home, the final resting place when state shift finalizes. It's a siren song sung by Hellcats, aping our majesty from the self-same shadows while making the wrecking world go round. To it, we fight for a world we will never see, struggling under humans with godly power. We survive in the ruins of fascism that Gothic has outlined for centuries, i.e., while helping dispel the idea of superhumanism enjoyed by Americans out of ancient monomyth fantasies, bursting their bubbles to survive their abuse. So while the Medusa cannot die, challenging the state, raping her until the end of time, the Gorgon communist numinous sitting on state pyramids, the ghost of Caesar to squish them flat, or use them as makeshift butt plugs. We whores embody the same basic idea, i.e. her return is capital's doomsday, because it liberates capital's oldest and ongoing victims, horrors, by pulling the black veil aside mid-Mandelbrot, re. the infernal concentric pattern. A spirited traveler, great destroyer, reversing the colonial harvest and its lobotomizing opiates. Medusa was an Ancom slut, one who puts the pussy on the chain wax by wearing state wreckage on her sleeve, or backside. Be brave until then, comrades, and don't hesitate to fight back using what you got. Silence is genocide, so scream louder than ever, rub some funk on it, give it spice, white or black, leather or lace, spookiness or reverence, mood, in other words, shake your gross booty. Look on our work, see mighty in despair. Make the Promethean quest or Faustian bargain your rapture on the Aegis, i.e., ask the Aegis because they'll police you either way. Your revenge is being heard, so be heard while the cop, token or not, pimps you red-handed. When the man comes around, show him your Aegis, exist to defy them, and chill the profit motive solid and all it entails. The storm isn't coming, you see. It's already here, the eye of the storm. There's no fate but what we make for ourselves, i.e., in freak show solidarity, pushing for universal liberation amid difference. Don't rank rape. Forget Engels' sexist, classist, paid labor roll call. Working men of all countries unite. We must go beyond fighting for labor that is paid, white, straight, or male/token, because whores are classically unpaid, stolen from, and murdered by pimps. The state is a pimp. Cops are pimps. Canonical heroes and gaslit gay-capped girl bosses are pimps. So see you on the battlefield, wherever it finds you. Medusa is a death god. Re, we're fighting for a world we will never see. The refusal to obey being the first step towards actualizing it for those one step closer to state shift than we are. The murderous womb, furious with incessant rape. Sooner or later, someone pushes back, and no one pushes back harder than Medusa rebalancing the scales. The world is a brothel, one we take back for ourselves. Nothing terrifies the state more than a free whore. Paid and vocal about pimps then and now. Take whatever weapons of terror the state devises, e.g., black dicks, threats of rape below, and not only disarm them, but turn them back on the oppressor, to demonstrate intersectional solidarity among labor criminalized to seek universal liberation, or die trying. Often little deaths by big dicks. Pleasure and friendship are the point, teaching lessons about such things until state shift, man-made or otherwise, i.e. how the body responds to fear, as something to play with, e.g. the traffic light system, red light, yellow light, green light, and safe words, but also the sweet smell of sweat after sex during consent, non-consent, and similar secretions from this gland or that. In turn, we whores measure up, not to the state, but ourselves and our friends, redefining what consent even is. The reclamation of labor, therefore land, sex, and monsters. Sex should be consensual, not automatic, but it can delve into various taboo spheres without harming anyone, i.e. provided such elements are second nature at a cultural level, which takes time and effort to cultivate in opposition, to disrupt power and its violation of our rights at the state level, their avengers and built worlds, grounds for endless slaughter, versus ours mid-Amazonomachia, Vagina dentata, rip and tear. But whereas Beowulf theoretically goes home to be a family man, achieving pastoral bliss after raping Medusa, though he's doomed to revisit the same crimes to greater and greater degrees, a woman's work is never done, not until Medusa eats the state for good, and its pimp-like heroes jonesing for rape. Until then, fortune favors the bold. Be her firebrand, no matter what others say. The world is a vampire, so stake it. Stir the pot with your pot's macaroni stirring sounds. Everything is fake and gothic. It's all how you apply it. To be queer, do sex work, is to be the subject of state violence, requiring that we defend ourselves through the friends we make, e.g. me and mine through this series' creative successes decolonizing the Gothic and its endless playground, survive, solidarize, speak out. So when you're preaching to the choir versus deaf ears, build a church or haunt theirs until then. Raise Cain, tempt the fates, run with the devil. Let the scales fall from your eyes, using them like Medusa's own petrifying gaze to strike our enemies dumb, deaf, and blind. Act like it's your last chance to be heard, something tremendous and mysterious to leave behind by Galatea in the shadow of Pygmalion. Her tits were there. Nothing lasts forever, but how we live survives us for others to find, i.e. for the neo-Gothic tradition of found documents, i.e. castles in the flesh. So build with garbage because you are garbage. i.e. hot allostatic load, and the many times I cite it. i.e. pirated by the usual thieves, white straight men, but also token folks taking state pay to pimp the Medusa until she, the planet, cooks the state and eats it for a snack. It's a mood, something on which the Gothic thrives, alluding to death as something no one escapes, patrician or plebeian. The fact remains, capital alienates everything while sexualizing it, and behind every simulacrum of sex sold to the middle class, the arbiters of the state, Medusa's getting her nut in, i.e. while laughing at the ever-growing number of cop-like incels, male or not, dying for company, and blaming the whore each and every time for the incel's own inability to bond with others. We can turn off the tap, keeping them out of our communities while showing how stupid they are on the aegis, i.e. attacking the shadow of the whore that turns them, the useful idiot, into an object lesson, reversing abjection, i.e. someone raised on hate who can't play nice, follow simple instructions that largely revolve around respecting consent and not harming other beings by taking away their rights, collars without irony or consent. Nudity falls prey to state censors. Violence committed by state abusers does not. So remind them the price of their abuse by refusing to work with them, i.e. to drive the alienation they've routinely wrought upon themselves and others. Don't blame us if the shoe fits, pimps. The final stage of capital is death, its pendulous arrival presaged by endless isolation, sobering brutality, and total brain rot apathy, i.e. capitalism is a puzzle. Capitalist realism is a puzzle we horny, hairy livestock solve through Gothic communism, and whose anti-war and anti-rape lines in the sand include revolutionary cryptonomy's cure to capital, sloppifying creativity for profit. You are what you eat. With the rays of AI, the state is making something they can blame for their own crimes, and it looks like us while being force-fed to us like French geese. Be forewarned, the technological singularity is just a mask for the bourgeoisie, and their ominous refrains whitewashing Pax Americana, the imperial core, e.g. the Death Star from Star Wars, the myopic panoptic eye of conquest gaze of an angry god seeking revenge against outsiders on mobile frontiers, concentration camps, or Skynett's pyramid from T2, the JO crystal, etc., i.e. the liminal ontology of war, flying fortress, insect politics, the cheapening of life in service to the profit motive, and Baudrillard's hyper-reality, all being the reliable unresolved capital pushes towards, genocide and profit for those behind the curtain, poking whores with spears or starving them out. Like, fuck that noise. So do we rebellious whores, developed through play and Gothic to achieve universal liberation, versus the same old deceptions, i.e. to win the whore's revenge against the pimp, the latter having been made terminally cruel and stupid by capital, r.e. Don Quixote, policing the slum's flexible red lines. Whatever capital cheapens for profit and shitification, we enrich through hell is something we make in spite of profit pimping us, playing in hell amongst ourselves and happy, excuse the expression, as pigs in shit. We're accustomed to living in state shadows and slums. No, there's more to life and languishing inside the imperial core state of exception and its championing of the nuclear model, white supremacy, and other state absolutes geared towards ethnic cleansing and other forms of extermination. In short, we whores know we're just quintessence of dust, adapting however we can to survive inside the labyrinth, i.e. the Minotaur surviving Theseus by embracing chaos. Nothing is more noble than resisting rape, but also preventing it in the future to spare nature another genocide. So show the state what they have forgotten while pimping us, telling us people should know when they're conquered. Break the monopoly and canonical heroism's praxial inertia with style. Full steam ahead, babes. Balls to the wall. Fighting for land, labor, and monsters back. We whores like it deep, all up in our guts while putting the pussy on the chain wax. Schnella! Your commie mommy, Persephone VanderWaard. P.S. I wanted to include a small excerpt from an interview with Delilah Gallo, a sex educator and coach, who said this when concluding our interview for the Hailing Hellions interview series. Quote, Land back, Free Palestine, Sudan, Congo, Syria, Ethiopia, Cuba, Korea, Vietnam, Hawaii, Puerto Rico, Turtle Island, Lebanon, and all occupied, oppressed, embargoed land. Give to mutual aid. Learn about the indigenous nation whose land you are on. Lead with kindness, but don't shy away from conflict. Always ask yourself who is being left out and why. It is almost always going to be disabled people, indigenous people, trans people, children. Start a garden. Make some art. Stay curious. Don't obey rules that don't make sense. Be loud about injustice. abolish ICE, abolish the police, abolish the government, all power to the people, and wear a mask and test for COVID, unquote. Stigmatize genocide and everything to go with it, set the horror and all monstrous feminine free. I think we're going to skip the acknowledgements, like I can just scroll through it, but if you want to read it, it's at the bottom of this post, and I reach out to all of my muses and thank them, quite a few of them. I also talk about my friends, people I know that I'm not sleeping with, artists I've worked with, my professors, various other people that have just sort of come and gone, my exes, and the various other models, roughly 90. Artists that I've hired for the project, ace and neurodivergent people, my mom, various content creators, of which I give thanks to a wide number, and I write specific things about, saying thank you towards quite a few again. I talk about different interview series I had that kind of led up to what this book series ultimately became, researching first-person shooters, Metroidvania, the Doom franchise, heavy metal, the making of Alien Ore by interviewing Kaylee and Sam Spear, and various artists like Bob Ross and Frank Rosetta, and lastly to the many, many other artists that are mentioned and cited throughout the series. Thank you all very much for reading. Be brave, and don't be afraid to learn. Nazi pigs and neoliberals, fuck off. Persephone VanderWaard. So yeah, that's my book series. That is the commemoration of the models who helped make everything possible, but also just the reading of the entire ceremony, as well as us skimming the acknowledgements. This was a project that took, if we include all of my research, over 10 years to produce, with about roughly 3 years of writing from January 2022 to the current date and time in 2025. So yeah, nearly 3 years at this point, basically a month short of 3 years. And it's been a long journey. I've come out as trans since then, and I've met a lot of other people who have also come out, a lot of sex workers, people who I date, who I work with and or date, or who I just work with, and I've made a lot of really cool friends. Just over 100 people, not including the YouTubers and people that I've researched, some of whom I'm in contact with as well. So yeah, happy birthday to me, and I hope that you appreciate this memento mori, this commemoration of all us Echoes of Medusa, but also the book series. There's plenty of links cited within it that you can check out, individual essays, short pieces, chapters, but also entire book volumes, modules, and the series at large, which is summarized repeatedly throughout. So yeah, give it a look. If you like my work, let me know. The future of this channel is effectively going to be short-form content, such as video essays or react videos where I respond to people more casually. And also, I'll probably be reading books. I might read Frankenstein or The Hobbit or something similar that I really enjoy on the channel for fun. So it will be a combination of education and entertainment as usual. We'll see how that goes. But in the interim, thanks for watching. And until next time, stay safe out there and take care.